The Rakshasa looked weak on the outside, but it was actually an upgraded Rakshasa with a top-tier evolution ability. After killing it several times, Maruhan was already panting from exhaustion. But every time it died, the Rakshasa would turn into a stone cocoon. Then, as one of the blood beads on its chest shattered, it would come back to life again. At the same time, its level would keep rising, and there were 9 blood beads on its chest. That meant it not only had 9 chances to revive, but its final level would reach an unprecedented level 10. Kim Woo-ju stared at the Rakshasa in front of him as it kept dying and coming back to life. He instinctively backed away. Judging by the current density of the yellow sand, he realized the Rakshasa had already reached the threshold of level 5. With that thought, he immediately turned around, planning to head down the mountain and call the other team members for help. But there was no way the evolved Rakshasa would give him that chance. In a flash, it rushed right past Maruhan. Then it aimed a vicious chop straight at Kim Woo-ju's neck. In that split second, Kim Woo-ju instantly unleashed his poison ability. A puddle of toxic pus burst out and corroded most of the Rakshasa's body in an instant. After taking fatal damage, the evolved Rakshasa once again turned into a stone cocoon. A few seconds later, a crack split open across its forehead. The Rakshasa broke out of the cocoon and evolved again. This monster's power level had already reached level 6. Only then did Maruhan realize that the monster in front of him was an evolved Rakshasa. And every time it evolved, one of the blood beads on its chest would burst. Based on the number of beads left, this Rakshasa could eventually evolve all the way to level 10. Realizing this, Maruhan didn't hesitate. He immediately told Kim Woo-ju to run down the mountain and call for backup while he drew the Rakshasa's attention. Kim Woo-ju looked terrified, but he firmly rejected the idea, because in his eyes, Maruhan still couldn't fight a level 6 Rakshasa alone. Maruhan patted him on the shoulder and told him not to worry. Then he launched forward with an explosive step, charging straight at the Rakshasa. Since Maruhan had eaten this monster's flesh before, he could also evolve after taking fatal damage. Maruhan rushed in and threw a punch, but the Rakshasa dodged it with ease. The next second, the Rakshasa's brutal counterattack slammed into him. The intense pain made Maruhan cough up a mouthful of sour fluid. But it didn't end there. The Rakshasa's attacks rained down on him like a violent storm. All the ribs in his body shattered in an instant. Normally, damage this severe should have been enough to meet the conditions for evolution. But Maruhan's recovery speed was too fast. This kind of gradual damage wasn't enough to trigger evolution. Unless he was killed in one clean blow, the Rakshasa pulled back its fist, preparing to smash Maruhan's head. Maruhan braced himself, waiting for his evolution to trigger. But at that moment, Kim Woo-ju used his ability and attacked the Rakshasa. However, his poison had completely stopped working against a Rakshasa that had already evolved to level 6. Sensing that someone had attacked it, the Rakshasa gave up on Maruhan. It turned around and slammed a punch into Kim Woo-ju's head. Then came another punch, and another, smashing wildly into Kim Woo-ju's face. Kim Woo-ju's once plump face was instantly beaten into a bloody mess. At that moment, Maruhan grabbed the Rakshasa from behind. Without the slightest hesitation, he bit down on its neck. Then he instantly used all his strength and tore off a chunk of its flesh. Just as expected, the evolved Rakshasa's entire body slowly turned back into a stone cocoon. Maruhan held Kim Woo-ju and kept asking if he was okay. Unable to understand why he hadn't run away, Kim Woo-ju said this had all happened because of him. He was cowardly, but even he couldn't choose to run at a moment like this. With that, Kim Woo-ju passed out. Maruhan understood that Kim Woo-ju's recovery speed was too slow. If he left him here, it was only a matter of time before the Rakshasa killed him. At this point, calling the other team members was no longer an option. The only way left was for Maruhan to kill it by himself. Maruhan looked at the Rakshasa, which was still petrified, and realized it still had 3 evolutions left before reaching its final form. He absolutely could not let it evolve to level 10. He had to kill it before it broke out of the cocoon each time. Maruhan smashed the Rakshasa's petrified chest with 1 punch. Then he saw its heart still pulsing and evolving inside. As long as he repeated this 3 more times and crushed its heart before it broke out of the cocoon, he could kill it for good. But just as Maruhan opened his mouth and lunged toward its heart, a palm suddenly pierced straight through his chest. The evolved Rakshasa had finished breaking out of the cocoon early. With his chest pierced through, Maruhan completely lost all signs of life. The conditions for evolution were triggered, and his body began to turn to stone. The Rakshasa grabbed Maruhan's head with 1 hand and lifted him into the air. Then it suddenly unleashed its strength and hurled him deep into the distant forest. As the evolved Rakshasa moved toward the unconscious Kim Woo-ju, Maruhan was still floating in midair, turning to stone, completely powerless to stop it. He had no idea how far he had been thrown before he finally stopped. But the instant his evolution succeeded, he sprinted back in the direction he came from. In his heart, he kept praying that Kim Woo-ju would be okay. After evolving, Maruhan could clearly feel that his speed had risen to another level. He thought that with this speed, he might still make it in time. But when he returned to the original spot, both the Rakshasa and Kim Woo-ju were gone. Even the yellow sand around the area had disappeared. Just as Maruhan wondered where they had gone, the phone in his pocket suddenly vibrated. It turned out the evolved Rakshasa had moved to another area, triggering the alarm. Right after that, team leader Go Duckman called him. He said a level 7 Rakshasa alarm had appeared on Manhwa Island and told Maruhan to stay at home no matter what. Maruhan was just about to explain the situation, but the call was suddenly cut off. But in a way, that was fine. Now that the alarm had gone off, everyone would be heading here. All Maruhan had to do now was find Kim Woo-ju and move him somewhere safe. With that thought, Maruhan hurriedly began searching through the massive forest. At that moment, a ringing alarm came from the bushes behind Maruhan. He walked closer and saw that it was indeed Supervisor Kim Woo-ju. Maruhan rushed over and asked if he was okay. But when he turned Kim Woo-ju's body over, he realized his own hands were covered in blood. Kim Woo-ju was lying on the ground like a blood-soaked corpse, completely motionless. Maruhan froze for a moment as cold sweat poured down his forehead. Almost instantly, he picked Kim Woo-ju up in his arms. Then Maruhan began spewing yellow sand from his mouth. He hoped to use the healing power of ability users inside the yellow sand to keep Kim Woo-ju alive. But by then, Kim Woo-ju had already lost all signs of life. There was no chance for him to heal. Maruhan took off his jacket and covered Kim Woo-ju's body. A wave of rage began surging inside him. Meanwhile, Kanchana had already arrived on the mountain. Go Duckman, who was still on the phone with her, was also driving toward the area. But right then, the alarm suddenly shot up from level 6 straight to level 10. On the other end of the call, Go Duckman warned Kanchana not to act alone and told her to wait until he arrived. The moment the call ended, a massive explosion thundered from the mountain. To ordinary civilians outside, it probably felt like an earthquake. At the same time, the members of Manhwa Island who had already gotten off work were all rushing toward the area. But Kanchana threw Go Duckman's warning to the back of her mind. She believed she could no longer wait for the other team members. She had to stop this Rakshasa before it came down the mountain. Soon, she saw a figure through the swirling yellow sand, but she never expected that figure to be Maruhan. When Maruhan saw Kanchana arrive, he immediately shouted at her, telling her not to come closer and to head down the mountain. Kanchana asked what he was talking about, and when he had even gotten here. Maruhan strode toward her, but the decision in his heart had not changed. He shouted for Kanchana to go down the mountain and leave this fight to him alone. Realizing something was wrong with him, Kang Chana immediately grabbed his shoulder, told him to calm down, and asked what was going on. Only then did Maruhan regain a little bit of reason and quickly explain everything that had happened. He told her this was an evolved Rakshasa that had already reached level 10. Kang Chana's face changed instantly. Did that mean Maruhan had been fighting alone before the Rakshasa evolved to level 10? But Maruhan ignored her question because he knew very well that if he wanted to match the Rakshasa in front of him, he had to reach the same level. So without hesitation, he drove the wooden spike in his hand toward his own heart. Kanchana stopped him just in time and demanded to know what he was doing. Maruhan explained with no emotion on his face that he had eaten this Rakshasa's flesh, and as long as he took fatal damage, he could evolve just like that monster. Kanchana shouted, asking if that meant he could just casually stab through his own heart. Treating death like a game was no different from throwing away his humanity. But this time, Maruhan did not listen to her. After breaking free from Kanchana's arm, he drove the wooden spike straight into his own heart. The sight left even the battle-hardened Kanchana frozen in place. And Maruhan repeated this suicidal evolution a total of 9 times, while Kanchana was still trapped in shock. The evolved Rakshasa suddenly appeared behind her. The dangerous aura made Kanchana notice it instantly. Her body instinctively raised an arm to block, but the first thing to stand in front of her was not the Rakshasa's fist. It was Maruhan, who had just completed his level 10 evolution. Maruhan grabbed the Rakshasa's fist. Then he unleashed his strength, and its arm was ripped off in an instant, like a broken toy. Blood splattered across Maruhan's face, but he didn't feel a thing. At the same time, the Rakshasa's other arm clamped around Maruhan's neck. Then it smashed him violently into the ground. As it released a second burst of strength, the entire ground cracked apart. It pinned Maruhan hard against the ground, trying to buy time for its severed arm to regenerate. Meanwhile, team leader Go Duckman finally arrived on the mountain. When he saw Kim Woo-ju's body on the ground, his expression turned extremely grim. Go Duckman cursed in his heart. Damn it, how could this happen? But before he even had a moment to grieve, a thunderous tremor came from the forest behind him. At that moment, Kang Chana, who was watching the fight, had nothing but confusion in her eyes. Maruhan seized the chance and punched the Rakshasa in the face. The terrifying force sent it staggering. Right after that, Maruhan leapt forward, refusing to give it even the slightest chance to breathe. His fist was already loaded with power, but unexpectedly, the evolved Rakshasa's severed arm fully regenerated at that exact moment. It struck first, slamming a punch into Maruhan's abdomen. In an instant, Maruhan's body was hit like it had taken a cannon blast. He shot across the forest like a launched missile. Only after crashing into the rocky side of a mountain did he barely come to a stop. Seeing this, Kanchana instantly cut open her palm, preparing to join the battle. But Go Duckman, who had just arrived, stopped her with one hand. He shouted at Kanchana, saying she was no match for a level 10 Rakshasa, and that no one else could be allowed to die. When Kanchana heard that someone had died, disbelief filled her face. She wanted to know who it was, but Go Duckman only tightened his grip on her arm and gave no answer. And when he saw that the one fighting the Rakshasa was Maruhan, Go Duckman was so furious that veins bulged across his body. He had clearly told Maruhan to stay quietly at home. Meanwhile, inside the headquarters building in S City, Yu Young-un looked completely stunned and asked if a level 10 Rakshasa had really appeared on Manhwa Island. On the other end of the line, Second City Division Chief Ji Gum-uk answered that it was true. She had received contact from team leader Go Duckman and had already sent people to provide support. But, just in case things got out of hand, she was calling to report it to Jung Il-do in advance. Jung Il-do leaned back in his chair with a calm expression and said that nearly 2 years had passed, and since the incident at Solwall Mountain, this was the first time a corpse Princess Rakshasa had appeared. Hearing this, Yu Young-un's expression turned serious. Back then, the Solwall Mountain team had been completely wiped out, and the nearby homes had suffered massive damage as well. Jung Il-do told her not to worry. The Ganhwa Island team probably wouldn't end up like that. After all, they had the powerful Go Duckman there. And besides, they also had that guy, Maruhan. At that moment, Maruhan crawled out from the shattered rocks, with only one thought left in his mind: fight until the enemy was dead. As Maruhan closed in on the Rakshasa, he leapt forward and charged up his fist. The evolved Rakshasa showed no fear at all and began gathering power as well. The instant their fists collided, a violent shockwave erupted between them. When the shockwave cleared, Maruhan's entire arm had twisted apart like a mangled rope, bursting into a spray of blood. Right after that, the Rakshasa grabbed him by the throat with one hand. Seeing this, Go Duckman knew he could no longer stand by. Just as he was about to take out his eye and activate his ability, he saw Maruhan suddenly clamp both legs around the Rakshasa's waist. Then Maruhan swung his mangled arm and shoved the entire severed limb straight into the evolved Rakshasa's mouth. At the same time, yellow sand poured rapidly from his mouth. The severed arm began regenerating at a speed almost impossible to see with the naked eye. The next second, the fully regenerated arm burst straight out through the Rakshasa's mouth and blew its head apart. That's right, Maruhan had used the advantage of his own recovery speed, letting the tension from his regenerating arm burst the Rakshasa's head from the inside. After pulling his arm out, Maruhan didn't hesitate at all and immediately bit down on the Rakshasa's neck. After Maruhan tore the flesh from the Rakshasa's neck, that wound could no longer regenerate. That meant its life was basically over, but that still wasn't enough. Even after the Rakshasa was dead, Maruhan kept slamming his fists into its skull, one punch after another, as if he would never stop. Even when team leader Go Duckman shouted for him to stop, Maruhan simply couldn't hold back. Only when Kang-chana cut off the corpse's head with one slash did Maruhan finally stop throwing punches. Kang-chana held Maruhan and comforted him, saying it was all over. By then, Eden and supervisor Yoon Ji-won had only just arrived at the scene. They thought team leader Go Duckman and Kang-chana had taken down the Rakshasa, but Go Duckman told them that Maruhan had done it alone. The moment Eden heard that, his eyes widened in shock. Impossible. Deep down, he violently rejected the fact right in front of him. The next day, at Kim Woo-ju's memorial service, his parents cried until they fainted. Every member of the Ganghwa Island team lowered their heads in silence. Kang-chana asked Go Duckman if he was okay. Go Duckman said he didn't know why, but he could never get used to something like this. Kang-chana then asked how Kim Woo-ju's accident had been classified in the end. Go Duckman sighed and said it was the same as always. Headquarters handled it as an accident. Luckily, he hadn't been eaten by the Rakshasa, so at least his body was intact enough for a funeral. It seemed Ganghwa Island would never be safe again. At that moment, Kang-chana suddenly thought of something and asked where Maruhan was, and if he still refused to answer his phone. Go Duckman told her yes. After submitting his resignation, Maruhan had cut off all contact. By tomorrow, they would probably have to report it to headquarters. Kang-chana hoped Go Duckman could give Maruhan a little more time. She said she would try to convince him, but Go Duckman told her firmly that Maruhan would not come back, because he had gone through the same thing himself, so he understood. When Go Duckman was in S-City, he had also encountered a corpse princess Rakshasa. That mission wiped out his entire team, and he was the only one who survived. And after witnessing his comrades die right in front of him, he could never return to the field again. Meanwhile, Maruhan locked himself inside his room. He tried to numb himself with alcohol and loneliness. But then, the space on the wall behind him suddenly split open into a crack. Next, a blood-covered arm reached out from inside. As the person on the other side kept pushing, the tear in space gradually grew larger. And the person who stepped out from it was none other than director Jung Il-do. He calmly said that he had something he wanted to talk to Maruhan about. But Maruhan was badly startled by his sudden appearance and asked how he had gotten in. Jung Il-do smiled and said he had come over right after killing a Rakshasa at the scene. He heard that because of Kim Woo-ju, Maruhan had been staying home all day and refusing to see anyone. Hearing this, Maruhan curled up and asked if Jung Il-do had come to hold him responsible. Jung Il-do stood in front of the mirror, calmly wiping the blood from his body. Then he said he didn't have that kind of free time. Kim Woo-ju died because he wasn't strong enough. What he was more worried about was Maruhan's current state. The moment Maruhan heard that, he stared in disbelief. He couldn't understand how someone who was also a director could say something like that. But before Maruhan could think any further, Jung Il-do sat down right in front of him and said he couldn't end up like his father. Maruhan asked in confusion if he knew his father. Jung Il-do said yes. He had once served in the same unit as Maruhan's father. Back then, they had both just become squadron commanders for the first time, and the first Rakshasa appeared while they were on a mission together. It was a night in 1999. Jung Il-do and Maruhan's father, Han Suwon, received a special mission from their superiors to head into the mountains and deal with those unidentified monsters, the Rakshasa. That Rakshasa wore ancient battle armor and held a blood-stained iron halberd. Neither bullets nor heavy grenade bombardment had any effect on it. Instead, their teammates began dying one after another, because every time that Rakshasa was injured, a massive cloud of yellow sand would spread through the area. Then, the Rakshasa's body would begin regenerating at incredible speed. In their first battle against a Rakshasa, Jung Il-do and Han Soo-won's team was completely wiped out, and only the two of them survived. That battle left a deep scar on both of them. They still couldn't understand what that monster really was. But shortly after the fight ended, yellow sand suddenly began spreading around them again. Han Soo-won was startled, realizing that the situation might not be over yet. He immediately ran toward where the yellow sand was pouring out. And when Jung Il-do saw this, he chased after him. Only when they reached the depths of the forest did they finally stop. Just as Jung Il-do asked him what had happened, he saw a monster covered in eyes from head to toe. Jung Il-do immediately shouted for Han Soo-won to get away from that monster. But Han Soo-won turned back with no expression on his face and said that if they wanted to survive, accepting that thing was the best choice. Jung Il-do stepped forward, trying to pull him back. But the moment he got close, the space in front of him suddenly split open. As the crack continued to widen, a pair of smiling eyes appeared from inside. Then, a hand suddenly reached out. It pierced straight through Jung Il-do's entire body, and the memory came to an abrupt end there. Jung Il-do explained that Maru-han had already experienced what happened after being attacked by a Rakshasa, so he should understand it well. After the Rakshasa's blood entered Jung Il-do's body, he gained an ability. Later, he gathered ability users similar to himself and formed the Special Appointed Civil Servants Organization. He had also looked for Maru-han's father, trying to convince him to help run an organization that could resist the Rakshasa. But after gaining the Rakshasa's power, Han Soo-won was deeply traumatized and completely lost his mind. And at that time, Han Soo-won had only one goal. He wanted to go to Narok. The moment Maru-han heard this, he froze in shock. Because when he was young, his father had said the same thing while forcing him to fight gluttony. Before Maru-han could think too much, Jung Il-do continued, saying Maru-han's father believed that if he couldn't defeat the Rakshasa, then he should become one. Maru-han shouted in confusion, asking what it even meant to become a Rakshasa. Jung Il-do explained that Rakshasa ability users like them basically all had Rakshasa blood flowing through their bodies. In other words, they were carriers of the Rakshasa pathogen, and they could enter Narok at any time to become true Rakshasa. By the time their conversation ended, it was already midnight. Maru-han looked at his father's photo, lost in deep thought. Had his father really become a Rakshasa and entered Narok? Because before director Jung Il-do left, he had said one final thing. If Maru-han gave up fighting the Rakshasa, then from that moment on, he would consider Maru-han a Rakshasa. He also asked Maru-han if he was going to abandon humanity, just like his father. The next day, inside the Ganghwa Island base building, when Go Dekman saw that Maru-han still refused to come to work, he planned to head to the second city headquarters and submit Maru-han's resignation. But the moment he stood up, Kang Chana stood up as well. She told the team leader to wait, saying she still wanted to talk to Maru-han one more time. Just then, Maru-han walked in, with shame written all over his face. He had decided to stay in the organization and uncover the truth himself because he couldn't believe director Jung Il-do's claim that his father had become a Rakshasa. Meanwhile, Jung Il-do stood in front of a massive vessel where an enormous winged creature was locked inside. He thought, with excitement, that everything was almost ready, and soon he would finally be able to see Narok. At the same time, the atmosphere at the Ganghwa Island team office had completely lost its usual laughter, leaving only a heavy, lifeless silence. To break the mood, Yoon Ji-won suggested that everyone go out for a meal together. But Maru-han refused, saying he had no appetite. In the end, only Kang Chana and the others went with her. Yoon Ji-won told Kim Yi-bok that ever since Kim Woo-ju's incident, Maru-han had been depressed all the time, and it was truly worrying. But Kang Chana knew it wasn't just Maru-han. Everyone in the team was down, and the entire atmosphere had become awful. That night, Go Dekman used cooking as an excuse to ask Maru-han to go downstairs and throw out the trash. Maru-han had just opened the door while carrying several full bags of trash, and he immediately ran into Kang Chana, who had just stepped out as well. Maru-han asked curiously why she also lived here. Kang Chana explained that this place was close to the office, which made it easier to respond to missions. And it wasn't just her. Supervisor Yoon Ji-won and Supervisor Kim Yi-bok also lived in this building. With that, she helped Maru-han carry a few bags of trash. She told him that if he felt tired, he could ask them for help. He also didn't need to keep blaming himself for Kim Woo-ju's death, because it was the responsibility of the entire Ganhwa Island team. Maru-han lowered his head and told her she didn't need to comfort him. Kang Cha-na said this wasn't comfort. She wanted him to overcome it, because that was how everyone kept going. The people in the Ganhwa Island team had all gathered here after losing someone precious to them. The next morning, a level 6 yellow sand alarm suddenly went off. Go Dukman immediately arranged for Yoon Ji-won, Nam Yo-sok, and Maru-han to handle it. After hearing the order, Maru-han sluggishly got dressed. Eden noticed how depressed he was, so he raised his hand and said he would go in Maru-han's place. But his words were still as harsh as ever. What if they sent Maru-han and he caused trouble again? The moment Maru-han heard that, his mood sank even lower. But Eden knew very well that some things couldn't be said directly. In Maru-han's current state, he was in no shape to go on a mission. Before long, they arrived at the scene. Eden put on his gloves and was just about to search for the source of the yellow sand. But a tiny seed suddenly shot through his forehead. Then his entire body collapsed unconscious. When Eden finally woke up in a daze, he saw a red Rakshasa moving toward the unconscious Nam Yo-sek. Seeing this, Eden immediately broke his finger and activated his ability. The red Rakshasa's head was instantly snapped. Eden could hardly believe it. How could a level 6 Rakshasa be this weak? At that moment, Yoon Ji-won and Nam Yo-sok also woke up and asked Eden if he had already killed the Rakshasa. Eden was a little confused, but he still didn't deny it. Then, Nam Yo-sok suddenly froze, as if he had seen something. Under the large tree in front of them, a big orange cat was lying on the ground. He immediately rushed over and picked it up. The cat looked exactly like his own cat, Little Boss. But why had it appeared here? And its weight felt a little off too. But Nam Yo-sok didn't think too much about it. Instead, he held it tightly in his arms and said he would take it back to the office and get it something good to eat. Hearing this, Eden tried to stop him. But Yoon Ji-won simply waved her hand and told him to leave it alone. There was nothing wrong with bringing his own cat back to the office. Half an hour later, Nam Yo-sok returned to the office with the orange cat in his arms and proudly showed it off to everyone, telling them to look at what he had found on the mountain. Maru-han and Kang Cha-na turned around, and their expressions changed instantly. Kang Cha-na anxiously shouted at Nam Yo-sok, telling him to put that thing down right away, because that thing was not a cat at all. It was a Rakshasa. But the moment she finished speaking, the Rakshasa suddenly broke free from Nam Yo-sok's arms, and several seeds shot out from its body. Those seeds struck Maru-han, Kang Cha-na, and the others right in the forehead. Right after that, the Rakshasa quickly crawled outside. But in Nam Yo-sok's eyes, it was still an orange cat, so he followed closely behind it. When he turned a corner, the scene in front of him left him completely stunned. At some point, a massive gate had appeared there. Go Duckman, who had just finished using the restroom, was also hit by the Rakshasa seed. So, Go Duckman gathered everyone together and asked Nam Yo-sok if he was the one who had brought the Rakshasa back from the mountain. As soon as he said that, everyone turned to look at Nam Yo-sok. Nam Yo-sok explained with an innocent look that he thought it was his own cat, Little Boss. And even Eden and Supervisor Yoon Ji-won had seen it as a cat. At that moment, Yoon Ji-won suddenly stood up and said they could discuss right and wrong later. Since there was yellow sand inside the office building, that meant the Rakshasa was still here. She suggested they first check what was behind the gate. Before opening the gate, Yoon Ji-won told everyone to stay alert, because this Rakshasa could make people see illusions. But after everyone walked inside, they were completely shocked by everything around them. If this was an illusion, then it was far too real. At that moment, Kang Cha-na took a fighting stance and warned everyone that there was a Rakshasa right in front of them. It was a red, spider-like Rakshasa, and at its feet lay a young boy and a woman. The moment Yoon Ji-won saw them, her expression changed. Without hesitation, she immediately rushed forward, because that boy was her son, Xiaoming. Kang Cha-na grabbed her and shouted for her to calm down, saying it wasn't real. It was an illusion. She guessed that the Rakshasa had used something to pierce their foreheads, then read their memories, and created this illusion. Maru-han was confused and pointed at the spider Rakshasa, asking if that thing was also an illusion. At that moment, Eden put on his gloves and prepared for battle. He said that thing was probably real, and it had most likely been recreated using the Rakshasa information inside their blood. Hearing this, Maru-han couldn't help remembering what director Jun Il-do had told him. Basically, Rakshasa ability users all had Rakshasa blood flowing through their bodies. In other words, Every Rakshasa ability user was a carrier of the Rakshasa pathogen. Realizing this, Maruhan suddenly shouted that this Rakshasa's ability was probably to recreate the Rakshasa that had given them their powers. Kung Chana, already ready for battle, did not deny it. Whether it was Go Duckman's Ten-Eyed Rakshasa or Maruhan's Gluttony Rakshasa, they could both appear. That meant this was an unimaginable crisis. If they didn't find and kill the replicating Rakshasa behind all of this, things would become far more troublesome than expected. Hearing this, Maruhan's heart began pounding uncontrollably. If they didn't kill the replicating Rakshasa, that meant Gluttony would appear. And if the Gluttony Rakshasa really showed up, how were they supposed to survive against it? With that thought, Maruhan slumped to the ground. Seeing this, Go Duckman stepped forward and comforted him, telling him not to worry. No one here would die. As long as they protected each other, things would be okay. While they were talking, Kang Chana and Eden had already charged toward the Spider Rakshasa. With their seamless teamwork, it took only moments for the Spider Rakshasa to be completely taken down. This was the absolute strength of two level 7 Rakshasa ability users. As the Spider Rakshasa died, the surrounding scene returned to the hallway, and another iron gate slowly appeared in front of them. When the gate opened, the spores spreading through the area immediately made it clear who the second scene belonged to. This was Supervisor Kim Yibok's scene. Yoon Ji-won had lost her son, and what Kim Yibok had lost was his wife. And the Rakshasa belonging to this scene was a spore Rakshasa clinging to the ceiling. By the time Maruhan noticed it, countless spores had already flown into his mouth. Then, chunks of mold began surging from his lungs all the way up to his mouth. Realizing something was wrong, Maruhan immediately looked toward the other team members, but he saw that everyone had already collapsed unconscious after inhaling the spores. Only Maruhan, with his abnormal recovery speed, was still awake. Knowing the situation was critical, Maruhan endured the burning pain and tore away the mold spilling from his mouth. Then he leapt into the air and bit down on the spore Rakshasa's neck. A huge chunk of flesh was instantly torn from its neck. The spore Rakshasa, unable to regenerate, died completely after only a few moments. Maruhan forced himself to swallow the flesh, despite the nausea. But he realized his evolution ability had not been overwritten. In other words, he could not absorb the abilities of Rakshasa that had been recreated. After the Rakshasa died, the surrounding scene returned to the hallway again, and the members of the Manhwa Island team gradually woke up. Only Supervisor Kim Yi-bak remained crouched in the corner, shedding tears as he looked at his wife, who had not fully disappeared yet. Maruhan clenched his fist. Only then did he truly understand what Kang Chana had said before. It wasn't just the members of the Manhwa Island team. Everyone had reached where they were now after losing someone important. He was not the only one who had endured that kind of torment. Just as Maruhan made up his mind to pull himself together, Eden shoved him aside and shouted for him to get out of the way. That made Maruhan grit his teeth in annoyance. He had clearly been making an important decision. When the gate opened for the third time, a young boy was standing in front of a door, and that door was the passage connecting Naruk to the human world. That boy was Eden before he awakened. What they had to face next was the level 7 Fracture Rakshasa. Young Eden walked toward the Fracture Rakshasa and shouted for it to give him Rakshasa power. Power even stronger than his father Jung Il-du's. Seeing this, Maruhan felt a headache coming on. This lunatic actually wanted to gain an ability on his own. Eden, standing beside him, explained that only by doing this could he fight his father. Faced with the boy's demand, the Fracture Rakshasa merely snapped one finger, and young Eden's thigh was struck with a violent blow. Then, the Fracture Rakshasa stepped in close and threw a punch. Seeing this, the real Eden activated his ability. He didn't want anyone else to see the humiliating scene that came next. As a crisp, bone-breaking sound rang out, the fist the Fracture Rakshasa was about to throw was instantly broken. Eden continued activating his ability, planning to finish it off in one go, but unexpectedly, the Fracture Rakshasa suddenly stretched out its left arm, and countless palms attached to that arm opened at the same time. A series of crisp, finger-snapping sounds rang out. Eden's entire body was struck as if every bone inside him had been crushed. Then his body stiffened, and he collapsed to the ground. Seeing this, Kang Chana and Maruhan no longer hesitated. They immediately charged toward the Rakshasa. Right behind them, Yoon Ji-won and Go Duckman also prepared to activate their abilities. But the Fracture Rakshasa moved first, spreading open the countless palms covering its body. The instant it activated its ability, every finger across its body snapped. Kang, Chana, and the others who were just about to move had the bones throughout their bodies crushed in an instant, and they collapsed one after another. Maruhan was no exception. He fell to the ground, his whole body trembling uncontrollably from the pain. Only one thought remained in his mind. This fracture Rakshasa was far too strong. But because his recovery speed was much faster than everyone else's, Maruhan was the first to recover. Yet the moment he barely managed to stand up, several more fracture attacks struck him again. He couldn't move at all, which meant the evolved Rakshasa's ability could not activate. Because his recovery ability was too strong, the fracture Rakshasa's attacks could not kill him in one hit. Instead, that recovery power became a burden. Maruhan wanted team leader Godokman to use his ability, but Godokman was recovering too slowly. At this point, he couldn't even lift his arm. As the fracture Rakshasa walked toward Nam Yo Sok and the other two, and opened its arms, ready to crush them at any moment. Eden, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly crushed his back molar and activated his ability. The fracture Rakshasa's left arm was instantly twisted and snapped apart. At the same time, Kang Chana, who had not fully recovered yet, endured the pain and charged forward with her sword. She slashed at the fracture Rakshasa's other arm. But the cut was shallow, because with her bones broken, she could barely put any strength into it. The next second, Kang Chana's neck looked as if something had grabbed it. Then her entire body flew into the air, as if something invisible had dragged her up. She hung there, unable to move. Maruhan was shocked by what he saw. Eden wore the same expression. But after only a moment, Eden realized something was wrong. Kang Chana was not floating in the air by herself. She was being controlled by the blood flowing from the fracture Rakshasa. That blood had turned into invisible arms, and those arms were now wrapped around Kang Chana, holding her up in midair. But before Eden could think any further, Kang Chana's limbs were violently twisted. The unbearable pain made Kang Chana scream in agony. Seeing this, the recovered Maruhan rushed forward without the slightest hesitation. But before he could even get close, an invisible hand grabbed him. Just like Kang Chana, he was lifted into the air. If it had only been a guess before, Eden was now completely certain that attack was an invisible hand. And if the fracture Rakshasa that gave him his power had that ability, then Eden absolutely had it too. With that thought, Eden bit open his wrist and let his blood flow out. Then he activated the same ability, controlling invisible arms to slowly wrap around the fracture Rakshasa's body. Seeing the opportunity finally arrive, Eden immediately gave the signal. The next second, a sharp spike pierced straight through the Rakshasa's head. The one coordinating with him was Yoon Ji-won, controlling her spider. With the fracture Rakshasa dealt with, everyone lying on the ground could finally breathe a sigh of relief. This battle not only helped Eden gain a deeper understanding of his own ability, but also solved the problem of one level 7 Rakshasa scene. But the roar coming from the next gate instantly changed everyone's expression. Based on their guess, the next scene was most likely Maruhan's Gluttony Rakshasa. As Maruhan opened the gate, the scene inside was exactly what everyone expected. It was the Gluttony Rakshasa. The moment everyone saw Gluttony, they were shocked. Unlike ordinary Rakshasa, this Gluttony actually had eyes, which meant it was on a completely different level from the Rakshasa they had encountered before. In the scene, young Maruhan was being dragged by his father toward Gluttony. His father, Han Suwon, mumbled that this was the only way to enter Narak. If Maruhan wanted to protect humanity, he had to obtain the Gluttony Rakshasa's power. And with this scene being recreated, Maruhan finally solved the mystery in his heart. He realized that what director Jun Il-do had said before was the complete opposite of the truth. But Maruhan still couldn't understand why the director had lied to him. Meanwhile, inside the S-City headquarters, Jung Il-do was flipping through the list of newly awakened Rakshasa ability users with clear dissatisfaction. Because Rakshasa had appeared far too frequently this year, the number of new Rakshasa ability users had also increased sharply. But their quality was terrible. There were barely any above level 7. Hearing this, Division Chief Ji Gum-ok glared at Jung Il-do and asked what they were supposed to do. Could they forcibly create high-level ability users? Jung Il-do wiped his hands and was just about to speak. But Ji Gum-ok slammed the desk and snapped. Are you telling me to deliberately delay deployment just to create Rakshasa ability users from the victims? Director Jun Il-do, do you even know how dangerous that idea is? While the two were arguing, someone suddenly knocked on the office door. The assistant secretary reported that they could no longer contact the Ganghwa Island team. Ji Gum-ok, already furious, snapped that it was Ganghwa Island again, and told them to find out immediately why they couldn't be contacted. Did they just clock out early because they had nothing to do? But what they didn't know was that the Manhwa Island team was currently facing the gluttony Rakshasa, one of the 8. They wanted to get off work early, more than anyone else. They thought this would be a brutal battle with a massive gap in power. But unexpectedly, only moments after the scene was recreated, the gluttony Rakshasa's entire body began to collapse. Under everyone's confused gaze, it turned into a pile of dust and disappeared, as if the space itself could not withstand gluttony's appearance. Although they had no idea what had happened, not having to fight gluttony was already a good thing. When the scene returned to the hallway again, a sister's voice came from behind the gate. There was no need to explain. The 5th recreated scene was Kang Chana's Iron Rakshasa. Kang Chana told everyone to stay behind the gate and not move. This time, she planned to handle it alone. Maruhan tried hard to stop her, but in the end, he still couldn't convince her. So he had no choice but to let her walk through the gate by herself. But after what happened with the fracture Rakshasa, Maruhan still couldn't feel at ease. He opened the gate slightly and secretly observed what was happening inside. Behind the gate, Kang Chana and the Iron Rakshasa were locked in an intense battle. But not far from their fight, another Rakshasa had appeared. And just like gluttony, that Rakshasa also had eyes. At that moment, Eden also leaned in to watch. With just one glance, Eden's eyes filled with shock and disbelief. Not long after the second Rakshasa appeared, its body began to collapse, just like gluttony's. Kang Chana's battle against the Iron Rakshasa was also extremely fierce. But very soon, Kang Chana began to lose ground. Seeing this, Maruhan anxiously shouted at her. But Kang Chana told him not to come over. She said she had to defeat it alone. Maruhan explained that he respected her choice, but he only wanted to remind her to pay attention and learn the Iron Rakshasa's ability. For example, the iron armor curse covering that thing's entire body. As soon as Maruhan finished speaking, Eden shut the gate. Now, all they could do was wait for the battle behind the gate to end. A few moments later, a sharp claw slowly pushed the gate open. The moment Maruhan saw it, cold sweat broke out across his body. But the figure that finally walked out instantly dissolved all the tension. Kang Chana had not only won, but she had also completed the missing part of her iron ability. Kang Chana, nearly drained of all strength, collapsed straight into Maruhan's arms. Then she passed out completely. Now that the Iron Rakshasa had been dealt with, only Go Dokman and Nam Yosak's Rakshasa remained. But after a while, the gate that should have appeared still did not form. Eden guessed that the Rakshasa they first encountered in the mountains was probably Supervisor Nam Yosak's. After all, that thing's ability was very similar to Nam Yosak's. Only then did Nam Yosak suddenly realize it. A year ago, when he went into the mountains to search for Little Boss, he had indeed encountered a Rakshasa. Everything matched. But there was still one problem. Go Duckman's Darkness Rakshasa had not appeared, so how were they supposed to explain that? On top of that, the yellow sand around them was slowly fading, and there was still no sign of the replicating Rakshasa. Go Duckman yawned and said casually that maybe the replicating Rakshasa had forgotten about him. Or maybe Kang Chana had taken it down inside while fighting. With that, Go Duckman waved his hand and suggested they take Kang Chana to the hospital first, then go celebrate with Pork Belly later. But the moment he finished speaking, Maruhan punched him in the face. For a moment, every team member was startled. Maruhan grabbed Go Duckman on the ground and accused him of being the replicating Rakshasa. Yoon Ji-won stepped forward in confusion and asked Maruhan what he was doing. Maruhan explained that this guy was not their team leader. The real team leader got diarrhea from eating pork belly yesterday, so there was no way he would want to eat it again today. The moment everyone heard that, everyone's heart skipped a beat. Then they all immediately began punching and kicking Go Duckman. Unable to take it anymore, Go Duckman hurriedly shouted for everyone to stop, saying he had something to say. But as soon as he stood up, he suddenly ran outside. When he reached the road outside, he was hit by the real Go Duckman, who had just arrived by car. Realizing he had hit someone, Go Duckman quickly opened the car door. But what he found on the ground was an infant-like Rakshasa, slowly disappearing. After they returned to the office and reviewed everything, Go Duckman finally understood that while he had gone to see a doctor because of his diarrhea, a Rakshasa had infiltrated the Manhwa Island team. If headquarters found out, they might lose an entire year's salary. So he demanded that every team member keep this secret. After work, Eden went to Kang Chana and told her that he had also seen the second Rakshasa that appeared in her memory. That Rakshasa was most likely the same person as his father, Jung Il-do. 20 years ago, when he happily went to the basement to look for his father, all he saw in the basement was that Rakshasa. But because Eden was still very young back then, he did not know the truth of what had happened. But today, after seeing Kang Chana's past, he was finally certain. However, after hearing his explanation, Kang Chana still refused to believe that Director Jung was the killer who murdered her entire family. But Eden believed it without a doubt, because he became a special appointee just to gain enough power to uncover the secrets of his father, Jung Il-do. And now that the opportunity was right in front of him, Eden had no intention of letting it go. He and Kang Chana came up with a plan. So the next day, they brought Maruhan with them to S City headquarters to meet Jung Il-do. When Jung Il-do arrived, Eden got straight to the point and asked if he had been there when Kang Chana obtained her Rakshasa ability. Kang Chana immediately followed up, saying that back then, there had been a Rakshasa with eyes, completely different from the others, and she had heard that Rakshasa was the director himself. Faced with an accusation with no evidence, Jung Il-do naturally refused to admit it. Instead, he blamed them, asking if they had been influenced by Eden, and were now blaming him, the father, for his wife's death. But Eden had never suspected his father of killing his mother. He simply wanted to expose the true face of the man standing in front of him, and the key person for that was Maruhan, the one who could produce yellow sand. But Jung Il-do's threat left Maruhan caught in a difficult choice. He warned Maruhan that if he produced yellow sand again outside of combat, he would no longer be allowed to stay on Gangha Island. Just as Maruhan hesitated, Kang Chana stepped forward and told him he did not have to choose. She wanted to know the truth of that day, but she could not use Maruhan to get it. Those words were exactly what made Maruhan decide. He chose to help Kang Chana uncover the truth of that day. As Maruhan released yellow sand, he instantly activated the fracture ability. The glass behind Jung Il-do shattered along with it. Then Eden pushed his father off the high-rise without hesitation. It was a huge gamble. If Jung Il-do was not a Rakshasa, then without yellow sand he would die for sure. But as a spatial crack appeared above the three of them, Jung Il-do emerged while releasing yellow sand, completely proving their suspicion. At that moment, Yu Young-in and the Wang brothers who had come to report happened to witness the scene. Seeing yellow sand constantly pouring from Jung Il-do's body, Yu Young-un's expression immediately darkened. Kang Chana explained to Yu Young-un that she had something to report about the director, and it was related to him and the death of her family. At that moment, Jung Il-do suddenly asked if the three of them were the only ones who suspected his identity, when Maruhan and the others gave no answer. Jung Il-do already understood everything. Then, Jung Il-do slammed his palm against the ground. A powerful spatial force instantly spread out from beneath them. He used spatial transfer to bring everyone present to an abandoned mausoleum building. Right after that, he raised his hand and tore through the void, unleashing a spatial slash. Yu Young-un reacted immediately and shouted for everyone to get down. The moment she finished speaking, a slash that tore through space swept over everyone's heads. Thanks to Division Chief Yu Young-un's warning, everyone dodged in time and barely survived. Yu Young-in questioned Jung Il-do in disbelief, asking if he had gone insane and why he was suddenly trying to kill these team members for no reason. Jung Il-do told her he was simply cutting away the rotten parts inside the organization. Some children had seen things they should never have seen. He said Yu Young-in and Wang Gijung should have been valuable forces in the fight against Narak, but unfortunately, they had already been infected by the rot. Then he looked at Maruhan and said it would not be a bad idea to eliminate him here as well, because being targeted by Narak would become very troublesome. Maruhan pointed at himself and shouted in confusion, asking why Narak would be targeting him. But during their conversation, Jung Il-do had already used his hand to quietly tear open a spatial crack. He spoke calmly, saying, "Who knew after all? Humans were simply too weak." But the moment he finished speaking, an arm suddenly appeared from the space behind Eden and Kang Chana. The next second, both of their heads were cleanly severed. This was the absolute, undeniable, instant kill power and overwhelming suppression of a spatial ability user. The first thing their companions felt after seeing them die was not anger, but a suffocating helplessness that came from the depths of their souls. At that moment, Division Chief Yu Young-un finally revealed her Rakshasa ability. She suddenly drove her arm into her own chest. Then she forcibly grabbed her still beating heart and stopped it with her bare hand. The moment her heart stopped, time across the entire space was forcibly frozen. This was one of Yu Young-in's abilities. Time stop. Right after that, without the slightest hesitation, she sacrificed 5 years of her lifespan and rewound time to 5 seconds earlier. As the scenes reversed frame by frame, The timeline returned to the moment right before Jung Il-do was about to launch his sneak attack. Jung Il-do, who was about to repeat the killing move, instantly sensed that something was wrong. He waved his hand and gave up on that useless attack, because he knew Yu Young-eun had used the Time Rakshasa's ability. Repeating the same move again would be meaningless. But after time rewound, Yu Young-eun still immediately shoved Kang Chana and Eden to the ground to dodge the attack. And the fact that Jung Il-do could see the traces of her ability made disbelief flash through Yu Young-eun's eyes. But Jung Il-do was not the only one there who noticed the anomaly. The time rewind had also failed to correct Maruhan's thoughts and memories. Maruhan looked completely confused. He had clearly seen Eden and Kang Chana die, so why were they still alive now? At that moment, Yu Young-eun's expression turned extremely grim. Jung Il-do was one thing, but why could Maruhan also notice the traces of her ability? But before she could think any further, the Wong brothers charged straight toward Jung Il-do. They didn't understand anything about time. All they knew was that they could no longer hold back. But when they closed in, their fists hit nothing but empty air. Jung Il-do stepped through a spatial crack, passed straight through their bodies, and walked directly toward Eden, who was still activating his ability. Eden gritted his teeth and demanded to know if Jung Il-do had just tried to kill him. How could a father do that to his own son? With that, Eden snapped his finger and activated his ability. One of Jung Il-do's hands was instantly twisted like a mangled rope. Hearing this, Jung Il-do calmly explained that it was because he was not Eden's father at all. As soon as he said that, a trace of spatial power gathered at his fingertip. Kang Chana and Maruhan reacted instantly, tackling Eden to the ground before the spatial slash could cut through his head. Maruhan angrily cursed at Eden, asking if he was still longing for some tiny bit of parental mercy at a time like this. If he didn't want to die, then he needed to pull himself together. Yu Young-eun, who had recovered, quickly gave everyone a battle plan. At that moment, the Wang brothers also revealed their ability. When they pressed their palms together, strands of blood began connecting from their fingertips. They were unbelievably powerful, twin Rakshasa ability users. After activating their ability, Serum Link, their speed and strength would become twice what they were before. But if that was all, it still wouldn't be enough to call their ability broken. Jung Il-do looked at the charging Wang Gijung as if he were looking at a clown. With a casual wave of his hand, he cut off the man's head. But what he never expected was that Wang Jijung's incoming fist still slammed into his face. Even after his head was separated from his body, Wang Gijung did not die. Instead, he laughed and said it actually worked. This was the most broken part of their ability. As long as the serum link was not severed, they would not die. Figuring out how it worked, Jung Il-do raised his hand and unleashed another spatial slash. He tried to completely cut through the blood threads linking the two brothers together. When the attack landed, the connected threads were briefly separated. But once the spatial rift left by the slash disappeared, the threads returned to normal. The serum link could not be severed, because it was the bond of blood thicker than water. Wang Gijung's head, lying on the ground, politely thanked the director for cooperating. Meanwhile, his body kept closing in on the director, throwing punch after punch. Realizing he could not deal with the brothers for the moment, Jung Il-do could only keep dodging. Seeing this, Eden grew extremely anxious. Jung Il-do was using dark space movement to avoid every attack. If this continued, there would be no way forward. Kang Chana told him that the Wang brothers' goal was not to attack the director, but to use the unbreakable serum link threads to trap him. As the serum link threads wrapped all around Jung Il-do's body, the Wang brothers began pulling the net shut. They pulled the threads tight from both sides, pinning Jung Il-do firmly in place. The time had come, and Yu Young-eun quickly gave the order to attack Jung Il-do's arms. Kang Chana stepped forward and cut off one of his arms with a single slash. Eden followed right after her and activated his ability, twisting Jung Il-do's other arm into a spray of blood. Yu Young-eun's command was decisive and effective. She wanted to disable Jung Il-do's arms first, so he could no longer use his ability. When Jung Il-do began releasing yellow sand from his mouth, trying to heal his injuries, Yu Young-eun immediately ordered Maruhan to use gluttony to bite Jung Il-do and stop his wounds from regenerating. After receiving the order, Maruhan instantly lunged at Jung Il-do. But Jung Il-do, who seemed to be facing certain death, suddenly revealed a strange smile. That faint smile sent a chill through Maruhan's body. Jung Il-do's body began transforming wildly, until a familiar black face was finally revealed. Sure enough, Eden and Kang Chana's guess had been completely right. But the moment Maruhan bit into him, A massive and dense spatial force wrapped around his body. The next second, Maruhan was pulled into the dark space. Jung Il-do finally revealed his true form as the Space Rakshasa, one of the 8. The moment he stopped hiding his identity and showed that black face, the entire space fell into dead silence. He never thought there would come a day when he would have to personally eliminate the warriors he had created. When Kang Chana heard the word created, her entire body froze. She stared in absolute devastation at the director she had once respected. Jung Il-do did not deny what she was thinking. He was the one who summoned the Rakshasa to her home and created that massacre. Because he saw Kang Chana's potential as an elite sports university student and believed she could become a powerful Rakshasa ability user. The moment he finished speaking, Kang Chana shot toward him. Seeing this, the Space Rakshasa slowly stretched out one arm. Then, Kang Chana's flesh and blood began disappearing from her body. The next instant, her entire upper body was completely erased, turning into a cloud of blood. Even Yu Youngin, who was standing behind her, failed to escape unscathed and lost her left arm. But as the ticking sound of time rang out, Kang Chana's erased body slowly began to restore itself. Her body also retreated step by step back to the moment before the attack. This was Division Chief Yu Youngin activating the Time Rakshasa's ability, sending time back 5 seconds once again. This time, she grabbed Kang Chana's arm in time and shouted at her not to attack recklessly, because charging in like that would only get her killed for nothing. Kang Chana asked her how they were supposed to defeat that monster, but Yu Young-in herself did not know the answer to that question, because after his appearance changed, she could clearly feel that the director had become even stronger. With only the team members they had here, there was no chance of victory. Even getting close to the Space Rakshasa would be extremely difficult. If anyone could become the only variable, it would be Maruhan. But now Maruhan had been dragged into the Space Rakshasa's dark space, and anyone trapped inside that dark space had no chance of ever coming out. Meanwhile, Maruhan was trapped in darkness, running wildly with no sense of direction. Even panting from exhaustion, he still could not see the end. Suddenly, a beam of light shone into his eyes. Maruhan looked at the faint starlight in the distance and slowly approached it as if he had found hope. When he got closer, he discovered a naked man. And that man was the real Jung Il-do. Sensing someone approaching, Jung Il-do opened his eyes in disbelief and asked how a human could appear in this place. Maruhan explained that while fighting someone who looked exactly like him, he had been trapped here, then asked what that guy's true identity was. Jung Il-do told him that the one outside was a Rakshasa that had escaped from Narak. Hearing this, Maruhan was deeply confused. If that thing was a Rakshasa, why did it have eyes? More importantly, why could it speak? Jung Il-do explained that it was because that being was a higher existence than ordinary Rakshasa, known as one of the 8. It was one of the 8 Rakshasa that had received the authority of the King of Narak. Unlike ordinary Rakshasa that only had the instinct to kill, the 8 retained their own minds and wills, acting according to their own desires. They possessed the power of the King of Narak, an overwhelming force beyond comparison. If someone encountered one of the 8, the only way to survive was to pray would not attack, because ordinary ability users could never defeat them. Meanwhile, the battle outside was like a predator stalking its prey. All Kanchana and the others could do now was protect Yu Young-in, the one with the power of time. Their bodies were erased again and again, and they had no idea how many deaths they had already gone through. Yu Young-in had no idea how many years of her lifespan she had sacrificed, or how many times she had rewound time. Her once beautiful face had begun to age drastically. The Space Rakshasa mocked Yu Young-in, asking how many more times she planned to rewind time. Instead of struggling pointlessly, wouldn't it be easier to just die? Hearing its words, Yu Young-un felt a chill run through her heart. She could hardly believe that the former special appointed civil servants had been fighting Rakshasa under the orders of a monster like this. Seeing Yu Young-un remain so stubborn, the Space Rakshasa smiled. Since they still wanted to keep playing, it decided to show them something interesting. Then it raised both hands, sending a wave of spatial power rippling through the air. One after another, gates leading to Narak appeared. When Yu Young-un and the others saw this, terror surged through their hearts, and while they were still in shock, countless Rakshasa began pouring wildly out of the gates. Kang Chana and the others immediately took battle stances, protecting Division Chief Yu Young-in in the center while forming a defensive circle and cutting down the Rakshasa swarming in from every direction. But after playing around for a while, the Space Rakshasa quickly grew bored. It decided to wipe them out along with the Rakshasa that had appeared and end this game for good. The next second, two Rakshasa charging toward Kang Chana were suddenly cut in half by spatial force. Kang Chana turned back in shock. Two waves of spatial power swept past both sides of their defensive circle, and wherever they passed, the Rakshasa were mowed down like grass. But as the space Rakshasa turned its hands, the two waves of spatial power began crossing and merging. They devoured the group's survival space at terrifying speed. If nothing changed, this was already a certain death situation. But just when everyone thought everything was about to end, a human figure suddenly shot out from one of the gates. Meanwhile, inside the dark space, after learning the space Rakshasa's true identity, Maruhan still asked Jung Il-do in confusion what the space Rakshasa's goal was. If it was one of the 8, why was it fighting against the Rakshasa? Jung Il-do told Maruhan that from the moment the space Rakshasa escaped Narak, it became an enemy of the king of Narak. Its plan was to drag humanity into Narak and start a war against it. In other words, the entire special appointed civil servants organization was nothing more than the army created by the space Rakshasa. Maruhan continued asking, then if they killed the space Rakshasa, would that mean the war against Narak would end? Jung Il-do denied it, saying it was already far too late. Humanity had already gone to war with Narak. After hearing this, a chill ran down Maruhan's spine. Once he came back to his senses, he asked Jung Il-do if killing the space Rakshasa would allow him to take back his body. After saying that, Maruhan grabbed Jung Il-do and tried to take him outside. But the moment he used even a little force, cracks appeared on Jung Il-do's arm. His will had already been bound to this place, and he could not leave. Sadness appeared on Maruhan's face as he said that his son was still waiting for him outside. Hearing this, a faint light finally appeared in Jung Il-do's powerless eyes. His expression became incredibly gentle as he asked Maruhan if his child, who was only 5 years old and still in kindergarten, had come here too. When Maruhan heard that, his heart sank. He never expected Jung Il-do's memories to still be stuck at that moment. After only a brief conversation, Jung Il-do's consciousness became extremely weak. Yet he was still murmuring that he had to go find his wife and son. Maruhan told him to hang on, saying there had to be a way for both of them to get out. But Jung Il-do told Maruhan that escaping from this place was impossible. Yet the moment he finished speaking, a hand suddenly landed on Maruhan's shoulder. A Rakshasa opened its massive mouth and was about to bite into Maruhan's neck. The next second, Maruhan reacted instantly. He blew the Rakshasa's body apart with a single punch. Maruhan was confused. How could a Rakshasa appear in this place? But when he remembered the large-scale Rakshasa invasion from before, he immediately understood. He remembered that the director had sealed all the strange pillar gates that appeared into the dark space. Maybe if he found one of those pillar gates, he could find a way out. But when he actually arrived in front of the gate, hesitation rose in his heart. He had no idea what would be waiting for him after passing through it. But if he wanted to get out now, this was the only method worth trying. With that thought, he walked straight through the gate. Beyond the gate was a crimson space, filled with endless yellow sand. It was the true hellish world, known as Narak. The terrifying density of yellow sand there nearly broke Maruhan's will. But then, a voice calling him to return suddenly rang out and jolted him awake. The moment Maruhan stepped into Narak, the king of Narak noticed him. Because of the gluttony Rakshasa inside his body, Maruhan's arrival felt like gluttony's return, and also the return of a traitor. As that voice faded away, thunderous footsteps that shook the ground followed right after. Maruhan could clearly feel the floor trembling, but he had no idea what was causing it. The instant he tried to think, he saw a tide of Rakshasa surging toward him. Maruhan immediately turned and ran. But in this completely unfamiliar space, where could he possibly run? Just then, Maruhan spotted a gate in the distance. Without the slightest hesitation, he leapt toward it. Right before the Rakshasa pounced on him, he stepped through the gate. After passing through the pillar gate, Maruhan finally returned to the human world. Seeing his teammates trapped in danger, Maruhan descended from above like a ray of hope, his fist already loaded with power. But unexpectedly, the space Rakshasa also noticed his return. Before Maruhan's punch could land, the space Rakshasa vanished from the spot. The moment Maruhan escaped the dark space, everyone saw a glimmer of hope for a comeback. And what came next was the battle between Maruhan and the space Rakshasa. Eden angrily shouted at Maruhan not to talk nonsense. With Maruhan alone, Eden getting close would probably be a problem. If this had been before, Maruhan might not have been able to do it. But now that he had the evolved Rakshasa ability, he had enough confidence. The space Rakshasa stared at Maruhan, unable to understand how he had escaped from its dark space. But before it could think any further, a green glow suddenly lit up behind it. A green beam of light blasted out from one of the gates. In just an instant, it covered the space Rakshasa's entire body. On the other side of the gate, the king of Narak roared with excitement, saying he had found it. The green light covering the space Rakshasa's entire body was constantly stripping away its authority. The space Rakshasa felt as if its soul was about to be forcibly torn out of its body. It did not dare waste even a second, and hurriedly redirected the spatial power in both hands. It tried to pull every pillar gate back into the dark space. As the pillar gates slowly closed, the surrounding Rakshasa began fleeing wildly back inside, right before the final pillar gate completely shut. The eyes of the king of Narak were still locked firmly on the space Rakshasa. After every pillar gate was pulled back into the dark space, this whole farce finally came to an end. The space Rakshasa had part of its power taken away by the king of Narak, and one of its hands had completely lost the authority to use spatial power. And the reason all of this happened was the group of insects standing right in front of it. Furious beyond control, it raised its hand and sent a spatial slash toward Maruhan. Even though everyone shouted to warn him immediately, Maruhan's head still could not escape being severed. Seeing this, Yu Yang'en immediately tried to stop her heart and used time rewind. But King Chana stopped her from the side, because Maruhan, who had just suffered fatal damage, had already turned into a stone cocoon. The next second, under everyone's shocked gaze, he broke out of the cocoon and charged at the space Rakshasa again. This was the source of Maruhan's confidence, the evolved Rakshasa ability. Seeing this, the space Rakshasa swung out another slash. Maruhan's body was cut in half again, then turned into a stone cocoon once more. After watching this repeat several times, everyone was stunned. Maruhan was using his 9 lives as the cost to close in on the space Rakshasa again and again. Before the space Rakshasa could even understand what was happening, the human it saw as an insect had already lunged right in front of it. It swung its spatial blade again, intending to end Maruhan's life for good, because it knew Maruhan had already used up every margin of error his evolution ability gave him. But unexpectedly, Maruhan suddenly lowered his head and rushed forward, dodging the attack. Then, with lightning speed, he bit down on its neck. For a moment, the entire scene fell into dead silence. No one knew whether Maruhan's gluttony ability would work on the space Rakshasa, one of the 8. But just as Maruhan was about to use gluttony, a wave of dizziness suddenly hit him. When he released his bite, he realized he had returned to the dark space. The space Rakshasa stood behind him and said coldly, "You will regret this. If you use gluttony on me, you will definitely regret it." Because Maruhan was the gluttony Rakshasa that devoured all abilities, Narak had sent him into the human world to steal its power. How long was he going to keep letting Narak use him? Had he still not understood the giant prison called Narak? Did he really want to return to that place where endless battles continued in the dark, where death and rebirth repeated forever? Maruhan was confused and asked why he would ever go to Narak. But the space Rakshasa grabbed him and lifted him up. It was not talking to Maruhan, but to the gluttony Rakshasa inside his body. It roared in confusion. "Gluttony, have you still not taken over this human's body? As one of the 8, what exactly are you doing this for?" As the space Rakshasa shouted, the gluttony Rakshasa hidden inside Maruhan gradually opened its eyes. A powerful force began taking over Maruhan's body at terrifying speed. Maruhan realized this was the sign that the gluttony Rakshasa was about to come out. The space Rakshasa looked at Maruhan struggling and laughed softly, telling him to give up. Any human who gained the power of the 8 would eventually lose their own will. So, gluttony Rakshasa, fight Narak with me. You will be freed, and together we will use the human warriors to destroy the prison known as Narak. As the gluttony Rakshasa's consciousness was about to completely take over Maruhan's body, the space Rakshasa lowered its guard and gave in to absolute madness. But unexpectedly, at that moment, an incredibly powerful will rose from the depths of Maruhan's soul, and in a flash, he briefly regained control of his body. He broke straight through the dark space on the level of consciousness. At the same time, in reality, he bit through the space Rakshasa's neck and swallowed the torn-off flesh without hesitation. And just like that, as blood sprayed into the air, the space Rakshasa's life came to a complete end. After taking down the space Rakshasa, Maruhan also fell unconscious. As the space Rakshasa died, its body returned to Jung Il-du's original appearance. Eden stared at his father's corpse in complete silence. In the end, he covered Jung Il-du's body with his jacket. Yu Yun-en watched the scene with mixed emotions. Although they had won this battle, Now that they had lost a fighter as powerful as Director Jung Il-do, how were the special appointed civil servants, or even humanity itself, supposed to survive from here on? After the battle ended, everyone went to the Ganghwa Iwan team apartment and explained everything that had happened today to the team members. Go Dukman was also shocked after hearing it. Although he had felt that the director was strange before, he never imagined that he was actually a Rakshasa. Yu Young-eun looked at Go Dukman, who had joined the organization earlier than her. Originally, she should have gathered all regional division chiefs for an emergency meeting. But she believed it would be better to discuss countermeasures with senior Go Dukman first. Go Dukman analyzed the situation and said that if they told everyone the truth, the entire special appointed civil servants organization would likely fall into an unprecedented crisis of trust. The government would definitely not sit by and do nothing either, and whether the organization could continue to exist would become a question. So before they found a solution, they had to cover it up for now, and absolutely forbid the truth from leaking outside. After they worked out a clear official explanation, Yu Yum-in and the Wang brothers said goodbye and left. Late that night, Maru-han and Eden slept in the living room together. Maru-han asked Eden why he wasn't going home and insisted on sleeping here. Eden said he no longer had the strength to go home, then told Maru-han to sleep in his own room because he couldn't sleep with someone next to him. Maru-han said his room was basically a storage room, and he usually slept in the living room anyway. Besides, he didn't want to sleep next to a man either. Then, Maru-han said there was one more thing. Today, he had met Eden's father. Hearing this, Eden instantly sat up from the sofa and demanded to know what he meant. Maru-han continued, saying that after Jung Il-do was attacked by the space Rakshasa, he seemed to have been trapped in the dark space the entire time. Maru-han had tried to save him, but he couldn't. With that, Maru-han quietly apologized with guilt in his voice, and the atmosphere immediately fell silent. Then, Eden quickly turned onto his side and told him to stop talking. But Maru-han told him that his father had said he missed Eden and Eden's mother, so from now on, Eden should stop hating his father. Eden said nothing. Only a hot tear slowly rolled down his cheek. After everything quieted down, Maru-han began thinking about the space Rakshasa's final words. The 8 set by Narak would come for him soon, and now that the space Rakshasa was no longer there to fight them, humanity would be finished. Thinking of this, Maru-han broke out in a cold sweat. He had no idea whether humanity had any way to defeat so many members of the 8. Meanwhile, inside Narak, under the command of the King of Narak, a human-like member of the 8, dressed in armor, passed through a pillar gate. On the other side, inside S City headquarters, an emergency national meeting of all division chiefs of the special appointed civil servants was being held. When Jigamuk heard that Director Jung Il-do had died, disbelief filled her face. They were told that Director Jung Il-do had been killed by one of the 8 beings ranked higher than ordinary Rakshasa. For a moment, Bae Myung-jik broke down crying. He never thought such a powerful director would die just like that. Gangwon-do Division Chief Hwang Wee-hee said now was not the time to cry. Their top priority was to choose the next director to lead them against the 8. But Jeolla-do Division Chief Jong Pyo had a different opinion. He believed that before choosing the next director, they first had to discuss how to report this to the government. Everyone had different thoughts, and the entire meeting room descended into chaos. Yu Young-in knew very clearly that without Director Jung Il-do, there was no way to control these division chiefs. If everyone learned the secret behind Director Jung Il-do, even greater chaos would break out. Meanwhile, inside the Ganghwa Island office building, Maru-han was typing furiously on his keyboard. The Ganghwa Island team was racing against time, trying to process all the reports they had fallen behind on. Even if the 8 were about to attack, they still had to finish the paperwork first. That was the life of a low-level civil servant. And, in order to prepare for the coming battle against the 8, every member of the Ganghwa Island team moved into the apartment building. But the men immediately ran into a dispute over room assignments, because no one wanted to share a room with Go Dukman. After arguing for a long time, they decided to settle it fairly with rock, paper, scissors. Whoever lost would have to stay with team leader Go Dukman. As expected, Nam Yo-suk's scissors were completely crushed by their rocks. So Eden and Maru-han won the right to live on the top floor. Maru-han looked at Eden, who seemed completely down. He was just about to comfort him. But then everyone walked in, carrying ingredients. On the surface, it was a housewarming party. But in reality, it was a gathering held to cheer Eden up. During the party, everyone kept interacting with Eden. They made him try the freshly cooked hot dishes. Then they made him unclog the blocked toilet. Yoon Ji-won watched the scene and couldn't help saying that Eden finally looked a little more lively. Maru-han was speechless at what she called lively, But then he noticed that Kong Chana was nowhere to be seen. At that moment, Kong Chana was standing on the balcony, staring into the distance with a lost expression. Maru-han went to her and asked what she was doing out here, and whether something was bothering her. Lately, she seemed like she had been in a bad mood. Kang Cha-na told him that after the space Rakshasa who killed her family disappeared, she actually felt empty, as if she had suddenly lost her purpose. Even though her revenge was over, her family still could not come back. After saying that, she smiled faintly at Maru-han and told him not to worry about her. She was only feeling down for now. Then, she asked Maru-han how he felt after learning that he was an ability user of one of the 8. Maru-han felt a bit awkward. To be honest, he had been planning not to think about that problem, because he had heard that humans who gain the power of the 8 would eventually lose their consciousness. But the moment he said that, Eden walked over and told Maru-han not to worry. Even if Eden had to beat some sense into him, he would never let Maru-han's will be taken away. But compared to that, they had something else to worry about. It was the thing they had seen in the basement of headquarters. A few days ago, they had seen a massive Rakshasa sealed inside a container there. Even someone at Yu Yomun's level did not know what that hidden Rakshasa was actually for. She had only heard the space Rakshasa say that the moment that Rakshasa was taken by Narok, humanity would be destroyed. That was the biggest issue the entire organization needed to think about right now. At that moment, Go Dokman called the 3 of them over, saying the party was starting. For problems they could not figure out, maybe relaxing for a moment was the best choice. Maru-han also thought that, for now, nothing would probably happen. But right then, above S-City headquarters, a pale golden light suddenly flashed. From a pillar gate, one of the 8 walked out, wearing armor. It swept its cold gaze across this world. Then it put on its helmet and declared that the slaughter would now begin. The moment it appeared at the headquarters building, everyone was frozen in place by that ancient aura. With just one glance, it felt as if they had been marked by a god of slaughter, making their bodies tremble uncontrollably. At the same time, a sharp and urgent alarm exploded throughout the headquarters building. A Rakshasa has appeared inside headquarters. All Rakshasa ability users report to the 51st floor immediately for support. The communication staff were sweating from panic, because this was the first time a Rakshasa had ever broken into headquarters. And worse, it was one of the 8, the kind of Rakshasa capable of killing Director Jung Il-do. So they immediately tried to contact Division Chief Yu Yomun like crazy. However, Yu Yomun was currently at the National Intelligence Service. She was reporting to the higher-ups about Director Jung Il-do being killed by one of the 8, but clearly these high-ranking officials still had no idea how serious the situation was. The Minister of National Defense asked her how she planned to deal with the 8. Yu Yomun told him that the abilities of the 8 would completely change the nature of battle. Not only ability users, but ordinary civilians would likely be dragged into a massive disaster as well. So the government had to take immediate policy action. But the defense minister told Yu Yomun that they did not need any countermeasures. They only wanted the special appointees to handle it quietly and discreetly, just like before. The army chief of staff beside him agreed, saying the most important thing was keeping everything secret, especially since their country was still technically in a wartime state. Yu Yomun had already expected this attitude from them. But she still wanted to get some useful information, so she asked how things were in other countries. After all, Rakshasa could not be appearing only in Korea. The director of the National Intelligence Service immediately scolded Yu Yomun, saying that was not something she needed to know. Clearly these people still held their arrogant attitude and refused to share even a bit of useful information with the people fighting on the front lines. Right then, Yu Yomun's communication phone suddenly rang. She was told that one of the 8 had appeared inside the headquarters building and was currently moving from the 49th floor toward the emergency stairs. The Seoul headquarters team on standby was confronting it on site. The members of this team had heard stories about the 8 before, but when they saw a Rakshasa with eyes in person, they still felt a strange sense of shock. The short-haired woman reminded everyone to be careful. The yellow sand concentration this time was far from normal, and they still knew nothing about this member of the 8's ability. But the whirlwind ability user activated his power anyway. He believed that no matter what, if they cut off its head, it would die. With that, he shot toward the immortal Rakshasa. With just one strike, a powerful wind blade instantly pierced through the immortal Rakshasa's body. Its head was severed along with it. For one brief moment, everyone had the illusion that the legendary 8 were not so different after all. But what happened in the next second completely shattered their ignorance. The whirlwind ability user who had just finished the beheading suddenly began spewing blood from his mouth. The flesh across his entire body started vanishing at terrifying speed and gathered continuously toward the immortal Rakshasa's severed head. In only a few moments, the whirlwind ability user had turned into a skeleton. Meanwhile, the immortal Rakshasa's entire body had already fully regenerated. Seeing this, the short-haired woman hurriedly activated her ability, and a massive flaming bow appeared in her hand. Then, she fired an arrow straight at the immortal Rakshasa, but the moment the attack struck its arm, the short-haired woman's own arm exploded into a cloud of blood. Her flesh became nutrients and repaired the immortal Rakshasa's arm. This was one of the immortal Rakshasa's abilities, causal transfer. The remaining 2 team members had already lost their smiles. They realized this Rakshasa could not be killed. The immortal Rakshasa slowly walked toward them. With an indifferent expression, it asked where the member of the 8 hidden by the space Rakshasa was. The 2 did not understand what it was talking about, but they still forced themselves to activate their abilities. As special appointees, their resolve was clear. Even in a battle they were certain to lose, they had to fight to the death without retreating. Lightning and chain abilities intertwined, blasting toward the enemy. But at that moment, the immortal Rakshasa no longer wanted to waste time. It reached toward its waist, where a sword-handled tattoo on its left side began glowing red. The next second, the tattoo turned into a blade in the Rakshasa's hand. If they refused to talk, then they could die. With that, the deafening sound of a sword being drawn echoed through the air, and violent sword energy mercilessly tore through the entire space. With one swing, the 2 team members were instantly cut in half at the waist, and the entire building was split in 2 along with them. Ordinary civilians outside thought an explosion had happened, and they all pulled out their phones to take pictures and watch. But the building did not collapse. Instead, it was being held up by a powerful force of convergence. The Convergence Rakshasa ability user was using his power to stabilize the entire building. At that moment, all he could hope for was that Division Chief Yu Youngin would arrive soon. Meanwhile, Yu Youngin and the Wang brothers were speeding toward headquarters by car. She had received a report that the 8 who had arrived this time was a Rakshasa with immortality. It claimed it had come to find the hidden member of the 8, and was now attacking downward at terrifying speed. But even by car, Yu Youngin and the others would still need at least 20 minutes to arrive. With that thought, she immediately called Go Deokman. Go Duckman, who was still in the middle of the party, answered the phone. The moment the call ended, his expression turned extremely serious. He told the team members that Seoul headquarters had just been attacked by one of the 8. Then he asked Maru Han if he could use spatial ability to take them to headquarters for support immediately. Maru Han had never truly used it before, but he still decided to try. With that, yellow sand began pouring from Maru Han's mouth. As the spatial ability activated, his consciousness pushed deep into the empty space, until every spatial gate capable of movement appeared before his eyes. The complexity of those overlapping pathways instantly made Maru Han feel dizzy. Blood began pouring from his nose without warning. Go Dockman urged him, saying there was no time left, and that he had to adapt to the spatial ability as fast as possible. Maru Han had no choice but to activate the spatial ability right away. Then he enveloped every member of the Ganghwa Island team inside it. With a flash of space, everyone appeared inside the home of a gamer shut-in. Go Deokman quickly apologized, and hoped the man would not call the police, because once they left and the yellow sand disappeared, ordinary people would lose their memories of this moment. Then Maru Han used spatial movement again. This time, they moved into a KTV room where gang members were gathered. At that moment, Maru Han had only one feeling. Spatial ability was powerful, but it was far too difficult to use. Only 5 minutes after the immortal Rakshasa appeared, the entire headquarters building had already become a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The Convergence Rakshasa ability user asked the white-haired woman how many ability users were still alive inside headquarters. The white-haired woman told him that aside from the 3 of them in the non-combat group, only 2 level 8 ability users remained. The white-haired woman was a Candle Rakshasa ability user. Her ability allowed her to judge how many ability users were still alive in an area through the remaining burning candles. Before long, the immortal Rakshasa encountered the remaining 2 level 8 ability users on the 25th floor. One was a Crow Rakshasa ability user, and the other was an Iron Fist Rakshasa ability user. Even though both of them were level 8 ability users, they were still no match for a single slash from the immortal Rakshasa. With just one blade strike, their lives came to an end. The extinguishing of 2 candles also meant they had died completely. Now, the only people left in headquarters were the 3 members of the non-combat group. Meanwhile, Maruhan was still repeatedly attempting spatial transfer, but he still could not find the correct location. However, after trying again and again, he gradually began to get the feeling. He slowly understood the meaning of spatial layers. The spatial gates he saw were no longer twisted fragments, but clear layers of structured space. But he still needed more time before he could fully adapt to and master the spatial ability. So the remaining 3 non-combat members had to survive long enough for support to arrive. At that moment, the immortal Rakshasa reached the floor they were on. It gave them one chance to live. As long as they told it where the hidden member of the 8 was, it would spare them. As it spoke, the spear tattoo on its right arm materialized and was pulled out. This was another one of the immortal Rakshasa's abilities. Every weapon tattoo on its body was a powerful ancient war weapon. The water escape ability user told his seniors to keep stabilizing the building. Then he used his water escape ability to wrap all 3 of them inside. The immortal Rakshasa raised the spear and hurled it with all its strength. The spear shot toward the 3 of them like a savage beast. But this seemingly ordinary and fragile water shield actually blocked the attack. A hint of interest appeared in the immortal Rakshasa's eyes. This human's ability was surprisingly fascinating. With that thought, the immortal Rakshasa pulled out the flaming bow tattoo from its back. It drew the bow and fired without the slightest hesitation. As the arrow closed in on the 3 of them, the immortal Rakshasa snapped its fingers. The arrowhead instantly burst into raging flames. The water escape ability user clearly sensed that his water barrier was being rapidly evaporated. Before long, a huge hole had been burned through the shield. The Convergence Rakshasa ability user was struck by the arrow and died on the spot. And without the support of the Convergence ability, the entire building began to collapse. Seeing this, the white-haired woman knew she had to make a choice. She slowly walked toward the Convergence ability user's body and held the flame representing her own life in her palm. She planned to sacrifice her own life to revive the Convergence ability user. This was her second ability as a candle ability user. When the candle flame representing the Convergence ability user Anran burned again, she was revived along with it. When Anran looked back and saw only scattered clothes left on the ground, she understood that the white-haired woman was dead. At that moment, the headquarters building began collapsing violently. Anran could only endure her grief and continue using her ability to maintain the building's structure. But the immortal Rakshasa's attack was still continuing. Countless flaming arrows came raining down from every direction. The water escape ability user Chahui knew his water barrier could not block this attack, so he immediately stepped in front of Anran. For the sake of the bigger picture, he had already prepared himself to die. But right then, a figure suddenly arrived. Maruhan arrived just in time. He raised his hand and tore open space, pulling all the incoming flaming arrows into the dark space. The immortal Rakshasa's expression changed slightly. Then it smiled and said, "So you must be my brother, Gluttony Rakshasa." Maruhan completely disagreed with the word brother, and clearly stated that he was an only child and had no brothers. Right after that, Kang Chana and the others walked out from the spatial gate, one after another. Maruhan raised his hand and used spatial cutting. Go-Duk-man tried his best to stop him from the side, but it was already too late. The spatial blade had already been released. One of the immortal Rakshasa's arms was cut off. But at the same time, the blood from Maruhan's corresponding arm turned into blood threads and flowed toward the immortal Rakshasa. This was exactly what Go-Duk-man had been trying to warn him about. According to the control room's analysis, this member of the 8 possessed an immortal body. If its body was cut apart, it would use the blood and flesh from the same body part of a human to recover. So they absolutely could not cut off its neck. Maruhan now understood that ability firsthand, but if that was the case, how were they supposed to deal with the immortal Rakshasa? While he was thinking, the immortal Rakshasa's arm had already fully recovered. It asked Maruhan where the other brothers were. The other brothers it mentioned were the members of the 8, hidden in the basement. And the immortal Rakshasa's purpose here was to bring them back to Narak and hand them over to the king of Narak. Maruhan scoffed at that. If it wanted to drag him to Narak, then it would have to prove its fists were strong enough. Realizing Maruhan had no intention of surrendering, the immortal Rakshasa pulled 2 ancient war weapons from the tattoos on its waist. Then it burst forward, charging straight at Maruhan and kicking off the battle. Just as the twin blades were about to cut into Maruhan's neck, both blades suddenly shattered. It was Eden activating his fracture ability. At the same time, Kang Chana flashed in front of the immortal Rakshasa. She thought that if she attacked its brain, maybe she could stop its regeneration. But the iron blade she swung was caught by the immortal Rakshasa with one hand. Yoon Ji-won's spider attack was also easily dodged by the immortal Rakshasa. At this point, every combat-capable member of the Ganghwa Island team had joined the fight. An Ran and Cha Hui looked at these unfamiliar ability users and asked which team they belonged to. Go Duckman told them not to worry. They were from the Ganghwa Island team and had come to support them at the division chief's request. He told them to focus on keeping the building stable for now, and that he would get them out afterward. But while they were talking, the immortal Rakshasa had somehow appeared right in front of Yoon Ji-won. Eden sensed the danger and decisively activated his ability. The immortal Rakshasa's sword-holding arm was instantly twisted and broken. But Eden suffered the same causal transfer in return. The immortal Rakshasa then hurled a spear toward Eden. Kang Chana stepped in front of Eden and knocked the spear away with her iron sword. Although the crisis was temporarily resolved, Kang Chana's entire right arm was left numb from the impact. But this was far from over. The immortal Rakshasa charged in again, wielding its twin blades. Maruhan tore open space and appeared behind it, activating gluttony as he bit toward the immortal Rakshasa. But the immortal Rakshasa caught him with one hand. At the same time, its other blade was already pressed against Kang Chana's neck. Although it could not understand why gluttony would fight for humans, it thought that maybe all it needed to do was cut away the human part of him. Just as it was about to act, a dark power spread beneath its feet. It was Go Duckman activating his ability. He removed his eyeball, and a dark, sticky liquid began pouring endlessly from the empty socket. No matter who it was, once they were touched by that darkness, they could not escape. In an instant, a hollow darkness completely swallowed the immortal Rakshasa, making its body and consciousness feel as if they had turned into nothingness. And within this darkness, the only ruler was Go Duckman. But Go Duckman knew very well that even if they cut off this thing's neck right now, it would be useless. This place still could not block causal transfer, so getting the team members to safety was the top priority. He transferred the lower combat members, Yoon Ji-won and the other two, along with the two surviving headquarters ability users, outside the building. He had them evacuate the civilians and continue maintaining the stability of the building. Meanwhile, he and Maruhan's group of 3 moved to the basement, because this was the best battlefield for minimizing damage to the building. They began thinking about how they could actually kill the immortal Rakshasa. Maruhan suggested using spatial erasure himself, making the immortal Rakshasa disappear along with the space around it. This suggestion was immediately rejected by Kang Chana because spatial erasure was far too dangerous and could very possibly flatten the entire surrounding area. Go Duckman frowned at that moment. Then there was only one method left. But just as he was about to explain it clearly to Maruhan, the floor above them was suddenly smashed open. The immortal Rakshasa had already caught up, since the hidden member of the 8 and Gluttony were both here. It no longer needed to waste words with these humans. After all, just the 4 people in front of it were nowhere near enough to defeat it. Hearing this, Maruhan smiled faintly. Who said they only had 4 people? In terms of numbers, they had an overwhelming advantage. With that, the hand Maruhan had placed on the ground erupted with powerful spatial energy. He was about to attempt an unprecedented large-scale spatial transfer. At the same time, Division Chief Bae Myung-jik, far away in our city, was suddenly wrapped in spatial power. Then he, along with Ji Gamuk, Hwan Wee-hee, and Jung Pyo, was transferred straight to the center of the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, every Rakshasa ability user in the country had been brought here. Faced with so many ability users, the immortal Rakshasa showed no fear at all. Instead, undisguised excitement appeared in its eyes. This was an insane, chaotic brawl. A legendary scene where one being challenged every human ability user at once. Maruhan had used spatial transfer to bring every combat type ability user to the center of the battlefield. To help everyone quickly understand the situation, Go Duckman told Bae Myung-jik to hurry up and read his memories. Because Bae Myung-jik was a psychic link Rakshasa ability user, he could not only read other people's memories, but also share the information inside those memories with everyone at the same time, making him almost like the central nervous system of the team. A massive amount of information rushed into everyone's minds, and countless scenes flashed past like a movie. Everything that had happened so far, along with the plan Go Duckman had created based on those events, was included. According to that plan, Incheon Division Chief Ji Gamuk, Gangwon-do Division Chief Hwan Wee-hee, and Jeollado Division Chief Jung Kyo had to follow the plan exactly. Ji Gum-uk cursed Go-Duck Man for being arrogant, but her body had already activated her ability. The immortal Rakshasa sensed the movement and knew these humans were trying to do something annoying again. Then it pulled a long blade from the tattoo on its chest and charged toward the human side first. It was not stupid enough to wait for them to finish charging their abilities. What the human side could do right now was defend unconditionally. They absolutely could not actively damage the immortal Rakshasa, because hurting the immortal Rakshasa was the same as hurting their own allies. So their top priority was to defend and protect Division Chief Ji Gum-uk. As long as they held out for 1 minute, Ji Gum-uk's ability would be fully charged. Before that, no matter what, they had to block the enemy. Seeing the humans continue their pointless defense, the immortal Rakshasa lost interest in playing along. Countless weapon tattoos across its body materialized all at once. Eventually, they merged into a massive bladed whip, an attack method the human side had never seen before. With just one swing, it blasted away a large group of humans blocking the front, and the blade edge that followed aimed straight for Ji Gum-uk's body. At that moment, Huang Wei-he transformed his entire body into scales and stood in front of Ji Gum-uk. The instant the blade swept across his body, countless scales were knocked loose and scattered. At the same time, Ji Gum-uk's ability was finally fully charged. The moment her ability activated, countless vines rushed toward the immortal Rakshasa's feet. Eventually, they gathered into a massive devouring mouth and swallowed the immortal Rakshasa whole. This was Ji Gum-uk's carnivorous plant Rakshasa ability. But it was only the first step of the binding plan. The second step was Huang Wei-he's responsibility. He covered the plant's surface with iron armor scales to strengthen the seal. However, even this could only hold for 30 seconds. The final key step was Jung Pyo's responsibility. He would use his complete incineration Rakshasa ability. He had to completely burn away the iron sphere containing the immortal Rakshasa within 30 seconds. Time ticked by. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 29 seconds. Everyone's nerves were stretched to the limit. Finally, after 30 seconds, the iron sphere was completely burned away and turned to ash. Had the immortal Rakshasa really died just like that? That was the question in everyone's mind. However, the sent Rakshasa ability user immediately poured cold water on their hopes. He sensed that although the immortal Rakshasa had been burned away, its scent had appeared on the floor above. At that moment, the flesh and blood of countless corpses inside the building turned into nutrients and continuously flowed toward a severed finger lying on the ground. That finger was the one that had fallen off earlier during the battle with the whirlwind ability user. As countless corpses turned into white bones, the immortal Rakshasa's body began rapidly gathering back together. But before it could fully recover, the immortal Rakshasa pulled a hammer from its chest. With one heavy strike against the ground, a violent shockwave surged like a dragon, ripping from the 51st floor straight down to the basement. The human side sensed the danger immediately and chose to evacuate without hesitation. This assassination plan had completely failed. With that single strike, the entire headquarters building was reduced to ruins. The immortal Rakshasa carried the previously hidden member of the Eight on its shoulder, scanning the area for gluttony. At that moment, Maruhan's mouth was being firmly covered by Kang Chana and Eden. A moment later, the immortal Rakshasa carried the member of the Eight into a pillar gate. Before returning to Narak, it declared to humanity that it would come back soon to take gluttony away. Only when the Rakshasa gate disappeared did everyone finally let out a collective sigh of relief. In just 10 minutes, the immortal Rakshasa had flattened Seoul headquarters and even taken away the Rakshasa that could determine humanity's destruction. They had completely lost this battle. As for humanity's future, everything ahead was covered in a dark fog with no path in sight. The day after the battle ended, countless media outlets began reporting on the collapse of the Yellow Sand Response headquarters. Some claimed it was a terrorist attack by Imperial spies. Some judged from the yellow gas that it was an alien invasion. But the government's official announcement said it was an explosion caused by a gas leak. Maruhan sat in the bathroom, watching the news reports. At that moment, his mother called him. She asked Maruhan if he was hurt, saying she had been terrified after hearing about the explosion. Wasn't the Yellow Sand Response headquarters the department where he worked? Maruhan told his mother that he worked on Manhwa Island, so he was fine. After a brief round of questions, the Wang brothers came to find him. They said Division Chief Yu Yomen had something to discuss with him. When Maruhan arrived at the temporary headquarters, several high-ranking officials had already been waiting for a long time. The immortal Rakshasa had said it would return to take Maruhan away, because the person in front of them was also one of the 8. Just like director Jung Il-do and the immortal Rakshasa, Bae Myung-jik voiced his concern. He said he was extremely saddened by the fact that Jung Il-do had been a Rakshasa. After all, he had soaked in hot springs with director Jung Il-do, eaten meals with him, and shared countless memories together. Jung Pyo told him to stop talking nonsense. He suspected Maruhan would soon become just like Jung Il-do and stop being human, so he wanted Maruhan to decide for himself what should be done next. However, Go Duck Man firmly supported Maruhan. Based on his observations while staying by Maruhan's side, Maruhan had the ability to control the gluttony Rakshasa. So when it came to his identity as a human, Maruhan would not change. And right now, this was exactly when they needed Maruhan's power. The only person with strength second only to the 8 was Maruhan, who was one of the 8 himself. Instead of doubting themselves here, they should be discussing how to kill the immortal Rakshasa. Team leader Go Duck Man. Spoken like a true leader, but you're just a team leader. Yet you're sitting in a division chief's meeting. Yu Young-eun explained that before she became a division chief, the original Seoul division chief had been senior Go Duck Man, so he had every right to attend. Maruhan never expected that the uncle who drank every day and slept at work had once been a division chief. But Ji Gumok said he still had no sense of responsibility. Ever since stepping down from the Seoul division chief position, he had hidden away on Dunhwa Island, and the last plan had failed too, allowing the immortal Rakshasa to escape. Facing Ji Gumok's criticism, Go Duck Man explained that the previous plan failed because it had been made in an emergency. This time, they just needed to prepare properly. But how exactly they were supposed to prepare threw the meeting room into chaos again. So-called high-level meetings were often nothing more than shouting matches. However, Maruhan stepped up at that moment. He proposed that he would lock the immortal Rakshasa inside the dark space himself. Yu Young-eun asked him how long he needed to activate the ability. Maruhan answered seriously, 5 seconds. As long as they could stop the immortal Rakshasa from moving for 5 seconds, he could trap it inside his dark space and make sure it never came out again. In the end, this plan was officially settled. For the safety of ordinary civilians, Maruhan had to stay alone in the mountains until the immortal Rakshasa appeared. Fortunately, his teammates were worried he would feel lonely, so they brought a huge amount of supplies and planned to wait with him. Maruhan was deeply moved and asked if all of this was really for him. Eden said team leader Go Dokman was just afraid Maruhan would mess things up like he did at the welcome party, so he told Eden to keep an eye on him. To be honest, Maruhan had actually thought about running away. The pressure from the immortal Rakshasa was far too overwhelming, and if he died, he might be the only one who felt like it was unfair. Noticing Maruhan's nervous expression, Kang Chana told him not to worry. The Ganghwa Island team would stay by his side. That sounded nice, but when it was time to sleep at night, they ran into another problem. The men had not brought any tents, and the women had only brought one. The four of them being crammed together at night made Maruhan somewhat regret it. He thought they might as well not have come, and he actually hoped the immortal Rakshasa would show up soon. Not long after, a pillar gate appeared in the mountains. The yellow sand alarm was triggered immediately. The value it displayed could not even be measured. The only being capable of causing that kind of reading was the immortal Rakshasa. The moment the immortal Rakshasa walked out of the Rakshasa gate, Maruhan also tore through space and appeared. This time, they were no longer relying on human wave tactics. Only a small number of elites had come with him. And so, the final battle against the immortal Rakshasa officially began. This was not merely a simple battle of revenge, but a fight that would decide humanity's survival. Everyone knew how powerful the immortal Rakshasa was. These ability users were not fearless. They simply no longer had the luxury of fear. The human side fought with everything they had and officially launched the 5-second operation. The core of this plan was Maruhan's dark space. All everyone else had to do was buy 5 seconds. They had to restrict the immortal Rakshasa's movement within those 5 seconds and create enough space for Maruhan to open the dark space. After Maruhan finished explaining the details, the Wang brothers charged in first. The immortal Rakshasa was just about to draw its sword in response, when drops of rain began falling onto its body. Right after that, a layer of frost rapidly spread from its feet and covered its entire body. This was the cooperation between the water control ability user and the frost ability user. For this operation, they had mostly selected binding type ability users. Their level did not matter that much. For a moment, the immortal Rakshasa was trapped by 3 different abilities. Maruhan thought the chance had come and prepared to open the dark space. But the next second, the frost was forcibly shattered. The Wang brothers' strength was also completely outmatched. They were grabbed and swung around by the immortal Rakshasa like toys. At the critical moment, the shady-looking uncle yanked his tie. 20 times gravity pressed down on everyone without distinction, instantly suppressing the entire battlefield. Maru Han accused him of trying to kill the whole team along with the enemy. But the shady-looking uncle said it was basically the same thing, since the goal was to stop the immortal Rakshasa from moving. Maru Han knew arguing any further would only waste time. His current mission was to open the dark space as quickly as possible. For a moment, the sudden 20 times gravity really did catch the immortal Rakshasa off guard. But after adapting to it, the immortal Rakshasa actually wanted to test how powerful a blade strike under 20 times gravity would be. It swung its blade, and the strike surged forward with the unstoppable force of a dragon. It instantly split the earth veins open and rushed straight toward the foot of the mountain. Fortunately, defensive personnel had already been arranged 500 meters away. Their job was to stop the aftershock of the battle from spreading down the mountain, while another group of sent Rakshasa ability users monitored whether any parts of the immortal Rakshasa's body scattered elsewhere, preventing it from regenerating like last time. On Wang Jizhong's side, he had completely lost himself in the fight. This was the first time he had ever experienced such an exhilarating battle. The stronger his opponent was, the more excited he became. During a close-range exchange of injuries, he grabbed the immortal Rakshasa's arm. With that grab from Wang Jizhong, the battle officially entered its second phase. The Psychic Corps, led by Bei Myung-jik, began taking over the battlefield. The battle shifted from a clash of real flesh and blood into a battle within the mental world. The immortal Rakshasa's consciousness was locked inside a space of interwoven yellow and white. The consciousness prison invaded its entire being and began reading its memories. Outside, Maru Han officially opened the dark space, and the 5-second countdown that would decide success or failure began. The immortal Rakshasa summoned a spear and tried to break through the mental space. Every time it struck that space, a psychic ability user outside suffered heavy damage. After a long 0.9 seconds, just as the immortal Rakshasa was preparing its next move, white light suddenly flashed before its eyes. It arrived on an ancient battlefield covered with corpses. A soldier in armor ran over to report that the enemy army had been defeated and asked the general to decide their next move. Right after the immortal Rakshasa ordered them to continue the pursuit, a delicate-looking boy ran over. With a bright smile, he called out to his father and said he wanted to join the pursuit too. The immortal Rakshasa gently patted the boy's head. The warmth in its eyes was a silent agreement. After the enemy army had been completely slaughtered, the soldiers dragged over several surrendering civilians and asked how they should be handled. The immortal Rakshasa did not hesitate at all and directly ordered them to cut off all their heads. The soldier was shocked and said they were only ordinary civilians, asking if they really had to be killed. The immortal Rakshasa drew the sword at its waist because it liked watching humans die, and the blood and flesh of the humans it killed would make it immortal. It turned out this was an illusion, and the immortal Rakshasa had known it all along. It did not understand what these humans were trying to accomplish by using the memories from when it was still human to trap it. But now, it no longer wanted to keep playing along. And at that point, only 1 second had passed. Seeing that the illusion had been exposed, the human mental bodies inside the illusion swarmed forward. They had to stop the immortal Rakshasa from escaping the mental attack for as long as possible. So they threw themselves at it recklessly, using their lives to stall for time. But every death inside the illusion caused the real body outside to suffer severe mental damage. Seeing signs that the immortal Rakshasa was about to wake up, the binding team acted ahead of schedule once again. Meanwhile, inside the illusion, the immortal Rakshasa had already gone completely berserk. Bei Myung-jik tried to threaten it with its son's life, hoping to force it to stop and buy more time. But the immortal Rakshasa, which had seen through everything, cut both of their throats with a single slash. After only 3 seconds, the illusion was completely broken, and the immortal Rakshasa awakened. It instantly broke free from the layers of restraint set up by the binding team. The shady-looking uncle still tried to suppress it with gravity, but unexpectedly, the immortal Rakshasa directly cut off its own arm, and the arm the shady-looking uncle was about to use to activate his ability instantly turned into nutrients. Only 0.9 seconds remained before Maru Han could open the dark gate. And the immortal Rakshasa had already sensed that Maru Han and the humans were preparing something dangerous. But just as it was about to move, the bones in both of its legs suddenly shattered. The immortal Rakshasa sensed the source of the attack. The but there was no one there. It turned out the Ganghwa Island team was currently hidden inside Namyosuk's field of non-existence. Kang Chana cut open her arm and activated her blood iron ability. A blood spike shot from her palm toward the immortal Rakshasa at incredible speed. Right at the 5-second threshold, it pierced through the immortal Rakshasa's head. Maruhan fully opened the dark space and completely enveloped the immortal Rakshasa inside it. As the spatial energy faded, the immortal Rakshasa was officially pulled into the dark space. Everyone held their breath, not daring to let their guard down for even a second. It was only when the scent Rakshasa ability user confirmed the immortal Rakshasa's scent had completely disappeared that everyone finally relaxed and began celebrating the success of the plan. But just when everyone thought the battle was finally over, a sharp pain suddenly stabbed through Maruhan's heart. Inside the dark space, the immortal Rakshasa had found the gluttony Rakshasa and was trying to wake it up. As the immortal Rakshasa slashed again and again at the barrier surrounding gluttony, the gluttony Rakshasa slowly began to awaken. Maruhan's body was hit by an intense tearing sensation. If the immortal Rakshasa had reached gluttony, it was undoubtedly trying to awaken it. So Maruhan had to enter the dark space and settle things with the immortal Rakshasa before he lost his own consciousness. More precisely, he had to stop the gluttony Rakshasa from waking up and taking control of his body. But before the dark gate closed, Kang Chana and Eden followed him inside. Go Dokman rushed over without even understanding what had happened, but the three of them had already disappeared. They arrived inside a vast, empty space. Maruhan could not understand why the two of them had followed him, even though he had already explained the situation clearly. Eden said there was no way a dense idiot like him could beat the enemy alone. Kang Chana told both of them to stop wasting words and at least come up with a battle plan first. This time, Maruhan's idea was to rely on spatial erasure. Unlike the outside world, they did not need to worry about the consequences of using spatial erasure here. The only difficulty was whether he could actually hit the target. That meant Kang Chana and Eden's role was still to provide support and control. Meanwhile, humanity was instantly pulled out of its celebration and back into full alert. The immortal Rakshasa had not truly been dealt with, so they had to remain ready for battle at all times. And this fight was not simply about the immortal Rakshasa. There was still an uncontrollable world-ending factor. That factor was Maruhan being taken over by the gluttony Rakshasa. At that moment, the immortal Rakshasa was still slashing non-stop at the spatial barrier around gluttony. Suddenly, the hand it used to swing its sword began to crack. Eden and the others had finally found its location. Without hesitation, Eden pushed his ability further, breaking the immortal Rakshasa's entire arm so it could no longer hold the sword handle. Maruhan immediately followed up with spatial erasure. But just like before, the activation speed of the ability could not keep up with the immortal Rakshasa's movement. In the end, the immortal Rakshasa dodged it with ease. Sensing the danger, the immortal Rakshasa did not use Eden's arm to heal its injury. Instead, it turned Maruhan's arm, the most dangerous one, into nutrients, maximizing the benefit of the battle. Kang Chana understood that if they wanted to stop the enemy from moving, they had to make its brain stop thinking. But before she could even get close enough to engage, a terrifying blade technique swept outward with the immortal Rakshasa at its center. Sensing the danger, Kang Chana bit open her arm again. She quickly formed a blood iron shield to block it, while warning the other two to dodge immediately. As the immortal Rakshasa swung its blade, the blood shield shattered instantly. Maruhan and Eden had no time to move, and both were struck hard in the abdomen. Right after that, the immortal Rakshasa flashed forward and pinned Maruhan to the ground. It understood that the other two were just ants it could crush whenever it wanted. The real threat was Maruhan in front of it. It would kill Maruhan here, then awaken the gluttony Rakshasa. As the blade was about to pierce his head, death was right in front of him. But Maruhan could not even move a finger. At the critical moment, Eden used his second ability and temporarily restrained the immortal Rakshasa. He shouted at Maruhan to hurry up and use spatial erasure. Seeing these weak ants get in its way again and again, the immortal Rakshasa decided to crush this noisy flea first. It swung its blade toward its own neck, preparing to cut off its own head, and turn the flesh of Eden's entire body into nutrients. Blood splattered across Maruhan's face. But what they expected did not happen. Kang Chana had already pierced the immortal Rakshasa's brain with blood iron first. To keep the immortal Rakshasa from waking up, she used her own blood to keep regenerating the iron blade, constantly destroying its recovering brain so it could not regain consciousness, and the price was a massive consumption of blood inside her body. Kanchana told Maruhan to hurry up and use spatial erasure. But based on the current situation, if he used spatial erasure, Eden and Kangchana would be buried with it. Maruhan would never make that choice. He waved his hand and opened a spatial gate. Then he used spatial power to forcibly drag Eden out. Right after that, he got up and shoved Kangchana into the spatial gate as well. But before she was sent out, Kangchana cut off one of Maruhan's fingers, seemingly by accident, yet perhaps on purpose. Maruhan refused to trade their sacrifice for victory. At that moment, he gradually understood the responsibility that came with greater power, and finally saw what it truly meant to protect someone. Although faint sadness flashed through his eyes, this was also his formal farewell to the person he used to be. Now this was a battle between Maruhan and the immortal Rakshasa alone. Maruhan knew it was impossible to defeat the immortal Rakshasa head-on, so he had to find another way. When the immortal Rakshasa grabbed his head, he bit off the flesh from its hand and swallowed it directly. This was the best method he could think of to deal with the immortal Rakshasa. He would let the immortality ability overwrite his spatial ability, causing the dark space to lose control. So he and the immortal Rakshasa would die together inside this collapsing dark space. The immortal Rakshasa cut off Maruhan's arm with one slash. But after Maruhan obtained the immortality ability, one of the immortal Rakshasa's arms also turned into nutrients for his own recovery. Maruhan told it to stop making pointless attacks. Now he also had an immortal body, so it could die here together with him. The immortal Rakshasa cursed Maruhan as a foolish bastard, saying he was willing to throw away his own life just to destroy it. So Maruhan would have to pay an even more brutal price. With that, the immortal Rakshasa cut off its own head. The flesh and blood across Maruhan's body began breaking down violently. Maruhan, who also had an immortal body now, tried to pull his flesh back, but he realized he could not do it at all. Even after obtaining the same ability, he still could not beat the true immortal body. Before long, Maruhan was sucked dry until only a skeleton remained. But that still was not enough for the immortal Rakshasa. As the price for making its immortal body die, it would absorb everything Maruhan had, including his soul. It would stop Maruhan from entering reincarnation, erase his next life, and completely scatter him from this world. But at the moment of crisis, the gluttony Rakshasa suddenly awakened. A massive mouth bit down on the immortal Rakshasa. The immortal Rakshasa was completely confused. It could not understand why the awakened gluttony Rakshasa would attack it. But soon, its body was torn into bloody pieces by the gluttony Rakshasa, and the immortal Rakshasa finally died for good. Maruhan's immortal body finally took effect, and his flesh gradually began to regenerate. Then, the gluttony Rakshasa pulled Maruhan into its arms. In the dark space that was about to disappear, it held him tightly. Maruhan could not understand why the gluttony Rakshasa was protecting him. Was it because he had to stay alive for the gluttony Rakshasa to survive too? But everything was about to end, so there was no point thinking about it anymore. A few minutes earlier, Eden and Kangchana had just escaped from the dark space, and were immediately surrounded by the members of the Gangwa Island team, who asked what had happened inside. Based on what she saw before coming out, Kangchana judged that Maruhan was probably trying to eat the immortal Rakshasa. He wanted the immortality ability to overwrite the spatial ability, so he could die together with the immortal Rakshasa. Fortunately, Kangchana had come prepared. Before coming out, she cut off one of Maruhan's fingers and brought it back with her. If Maruhan successfully obtained the immortality ability, then they should be able to revive him through that finger. And the price would be that they had to pay with a corresponding amount of blood and flesh. The members of the Gangwa Island team barely hesitated and chose to take on this unknown attempt together. At the same time, inside the empty dark space, a faint ray of light shone into Maruhan's eyes. Maruhan reached out and moved toward that light. He looked back at the motionless, gluttony Rakshasa. Then he pulled it along and moved toward the light together. As Maruhan got closer, he finally saw where the light was coming from. It was formed by pairs of outstretched arms. Maruhan did not hesitate and reached toward those hands. When he woke up again, he found familiar faces standing in front of him. He suddenly sat up, unable to understand why he had appeared here when he was supposed to disappear along with the dark space. And why had everyone lost an arm? Seeing this, Maruhan instantly understood what had happened. Nam Yosuk told him to stop moving around and hurry up and release yellow sand so they could recover. Eden threw his jacket at him, and told him to put it on already because his eyes were about to rot. And just like that, Maruhan slowly released yellow sand with a slightly embarrassed look on his face. After this incident, the higher-ups finally realized that without director Jung Il-do, Maruhan seemed to be humanity's only hope. And with that, the immortal Rakshasa incident officially came to an end. But the damage report from headquarters after the battle was terrifying. 90% of the Seoul headquarters team had died in battle. The headquarters, once known as humanity's fortress, had been reduced to ruins overnight. If the immortal Rakshasa had not returned to Narak back then, all of Seoul might have already ceased to exist. The overwhelming power of the Eight made humanity's sense of crisis explode, and a national division chiefs meeting on countermeasures against the Eight was immediately held. Since the immortal Rakshasa crisis had been resolved, and the truth that director Jung Il-do had been the space Rakshasa was no longer being hidden, Daejeon Division Chief Lee Hung wanted to know what the space Rakshasa had been hiding inside Seoul headquarters all this time. Division Chief Yoo Young-eun had very limited information as well. She did not know exactly what that thing was, but the space Rakshasa had once told her that they needed it in order to prepare for the day the prophecy came true. And that prophecy said that one day, Rakshasa would pour down from the sky like rain. This had always been a thorn in the heart of every ability user. Gyeongsang-do Division Chief Choi Woo-hwa asked if they had any information on the other members of the Eight. At the moment, humanity only knew of 3 members of the Eight. One was the immortal Rakshasa, who had recently been dealt with. One was the space Rakshasa, who had disguised itself as the human director. And the gluttony Rakshasa inside Maruhan. Although they had no information on the other 5, one thing was certain. They would definitely come to the human world for Maruhan. Jeju Island Division Chief Lee Jae suggested that they simply throw Maruhan into Narak, and the problem would be solved. On top of that, they could take advantage of Narak accepting Maruhan and lowering its guard to mass-produce ability users above level 7. Such an absurd suggestion was immediately met with a furious rebuke from Ji Gum-ok. Sacrificing ordinary civilians like that would make them no different from Jung Il-do. Bae Myung-jik also agreed, saying that abandoning their only ally among the 8 was an incredibly foolish idea. If they were going to put it that way, then killing director Jung Il-do had been even more foolish. After all, he had once been the only ally clearly standing on humanity's side. Chungcheongdo Division Chief Bong Jung-sik, who seemed honest on the surface, caught the flaw in that argument. For a while, the meeting room split into 2 factions and descended into chaos. Yoo Young-in knew that their arguments were not entirely wrong, but at this stage there were far too few people who could stand against the overwhelming power of the 8. So, keeping Maruhan from falling into the hands of the 8 became their only current mission. Now, Maruhan's security level had been raised to an unprecedented degree, with several high-ranking ability users guarding him around the clock. Outside the apartment, countless ability users were patrolling at all times. To Maruhan, this was like an airtight, invisible prison. It had even reached the point where he had to ask someone else to buy his underwear. Maruhan complained to Eden, asking how long he was going to be locked up like this. At this point, he honestly missed being an office slave. Being stuck in the same room with a bunch of middle-aged men he barely knew was pure torture. But what he didn't know was that the office slaves who could still go to work weren't having it easy either. Since so many people had been assigned to protect Maruhan, the workload for everyone still working had skyrocketed. On top of that, they also had to take care of a group of division chiefs who claimed they were there to protect him, but were actually just relaxing. Eden reported Maruhan's request to return to work. To go Diakman. The request was rejected immediately. Maruhan was told to stay home and stop causing trouble, and Eden had seen this coming from the start, which was why he had already given Maruhan that exact answer on Godukman's behalf. At that moment, Lee Jae called out to Eden. She said he was the one who exposed director Jung Il-do's true identity, right? He had used one of the 8 as bait to kill his own father. And now he was siding with Maruhan, who was also one of the 8. Didn't he think his actions were a little ridiculous? Faced with her provocation, Eden was just about to snap. But the alarm suddenly went off. Kang Cha-na grabbed Eden and told him not to cause any unnecessary trouble. They had to handle the mission first. This division chief Lee Jae was no ordinary person. She had become a division chief at only 21, and she had been the person Jung Il-do, or rather the space Rakshasa, valued the most. As they were discussing the situation, 3 Rakshasa appeared in front of them. Kang Cha-na reacted immediately, cutting open her palm and preparing to activate her ability. But the blood she was about to condense into an iron blade suddenly floated upward, out of her control. Then all of it flew toward a pillar gate behind the 3 Rakshasa. This strange situation left the 3 mission members completely confused. Did this mean a new crisis had arrived? At the same time, Maruhan also felt that something was wrong. Ever since the final battle against the immortal Rakshasa, his condition had been poor. Even the yellow sand he could release had become extremely thin. Bae Myungjik called him humanity's hope and kept talking to him non-stop like a chatterbox. The moment Maruhan showed a troubled expression, he felt a terrifying gaze pierce into him. It scared him so badly that he immediately changed his expression and claimed he was listening with great interest. Then Bae Myungjik put an arm around Maruhan and asked if he had a girlfriend. Don't tell me you've been single your whole life. You need to hurry up, fall in love, and have a beautiful child. After saying that, he even showed Maruhan a photo of his daughter and bragged about how adorable she was. This kind of life continued for more than a month. It nearly drove Maruhan insane because those bastards from the 8 never showed up. Then, late one night, along a coastal defense line, a naked figure approached a patrol officer. Did its appearance mean a new crisis had arrived? Or more importantly, what exactly was its true identity? The thugs who were beating up the addict suddenly stopped. Their eyes all turned in the same direction. A naked, long-haired man was emerging from the sea. A wicked smirk crept across the thug leader's face. He strode toward the man, thinking that his luck today was seriously good. Then he pulled a small knife from his pocket and pressed the blade against the man's neck. But the long, white-haired man was not afraid at all. Instead, he revealed a terrifying smile. Just as the thug leader grew angry because of it, the long-haired man suddenly pushed his arm upward and used a weapon in his hand to pierce straight through his throat. The thug leader collapsed into a pool of blood on the spot. The others stared blankly, instinctively trying to run away. But everything was already under the white-haired man's control. As his body moved, all 3 of their throats were sliced open at once, and they died on the spot. Only the trembling addict was left. He cried and begged the man to spare him, but the man simply complimented his clothes. The next moment, only one figure was left on the vast beach. The man put on the addict's clothes, let his long hair recede, and followed the scent of gluttony toward the city. Meanwhile, Maruhan arrived inside a dark red space. Strange threads were wrapped around his arm. From the other end of those threads came the sound of hunger. Maruhan guessed that gluttony was probably in that direction, but why was it so far away from him? But before he could think any further, the shouting outside immediately woke him up. Eden accused him of sleeping all day and told him to hurry up, pack his things, and go home. When Maruhan heard this, he was instantly stunned. He went outside and saw that everyone from headquarters had indeed already left. It turned out that in order to protect Maruhan, the only person with the strength to fight the 8, all the high-ranking ability users and higher-ups from every region had gathered on Manhwa Island to serve as his bodyguards. But after several months, not only had the 8 failed to appear, but the frequency of Rakshasa appearances in every region had actually skyrocketed. Rakshasa were appearing day and night, throwing every region that had lost its high-end combat power into complete chaos. To calm the situation, they returned to their own posts and gave up on the plan to protect Maruhan. Before leaving, Ji Gamok specifically told Yu Young-un to hurry back to headquarters as well. Every region was already a total mess. As people left, one after another, the once noisy office environment finally became quiet again. But deep down, Go Dukman had an ominous feeling. He felt like something was about to happen soon, just like the silence before every storm. Meanwhile, after returning home, Maruhan was staring anxiously at his phone screen. It turned out today was his birthday, but it was also the loneliest day of the year. He kept staring at the screen, hoping someone would send him birthday wishes. But the first thing he received was a call from his mother. His mother told Maruhan to come home for seaweed soup, saying she was probably the only one who still remembered his birthday anyway. In his mother's eyes, Maruhan didn't just lack a girlfriend, he didn't even have a proper friend. But Maruhan was currently on emergency standby and couldn't move around freely, so after chatting for a bit, he hung up. At that moment, Maruhan was filled with disappointment. Not a single one of his coworkers had sent him birthday wishes. Then the tightly shut door suddenly opened. Maruhan stepped out and saw the Wang brothers, Dijong and Jong-in. To protect Maruhan, they had specially moved into the floor below, and they also wished him a happy birthday. Maruhan was curious how they knew, and Jong-in said he had checked Maruhan's social media profile. To celebrate his birthday, Jong-in even invited him to go out and have fun together. But the moment he said that, his older brother kicked him hard. His older brother, Ji-jong, scolded him for having no sense at all. What young person would want to spend their birthday hanging out with an uncle like him? So he decided to give Maru-han the day off and let him move around freely to meet his friends. And just like that, on his own birthday, Maru-han was forcibly kicked out of his home. But he had no friends to meet, and even on his birthday, he had nowhere to go. Maru-han dragged his feet as he wandered through the streets, not knowing where he should go. Then his stomach suddenly growled. Maru-han instinctively thought it was gluttony making that sound, but when he saw the delicious tteokbokki by the roadside, he realized it was the sound of his own hunger, since he had not eaten anything since morning. He ordered a one-person serving of tteokbokki and began eating. Ever since coming out of the dark space, he still had no idea what was going on with gluttony, and what exactly was that dream he had yesterday. He felt like he had somehow grown distant from gluttony. On top of that, based on everything gluttony had done before, it did not seem to have any ill will toward him. Maru-han wondered if he should try talking to gluttony, but after thinking again, he decided not to. After all, he still had no idea what gluttony's true goal was. However, a greeting soon interrupted his thoughts. The white-haired man who had appeared at the beach before had found Maru-han. The man said to Maru-han, "Long time no see." But Maru-han did not recognize him at all and asked who he was. The moment Maru-han said that, the white-haired man immediately looked disappointed and asked if Maru-han really did not remember him. Maru-han could only force a smile and pretend that he knew him. The white-haired man acted completely familiar, while Maru-han racked his brain, trying to figure out whether this guy was a classmate from school or a comrade from the army. As they chatted, the white-haired man stared straight at the tteokbokki on the plate. So Maru-han simply invited him to try some. Seeing how much the man seemed to enjoy it, Maru-han asked if he had run away from home or something. The white-haired man agreed, saying it really was not easy to stay in the human world alone. That was actually an honest answer, but from Maru-han's perspective, this guy clearly had a serious case of delusions. He was already grown, yet still talked like this. Maru-han figured he should keep his distance. But then the man said, "It really is great that I got to meet you." And Maru-han's face instantly turned red. The white-haired man invited Maru-han to hang out with him for the day. But behind his back, he had already gripped a broken blade in his palm. Meanwhile, after the Ganhwa Island team finished the day's work, they finally remembered that today was Maru-han's birthday. Yoon Ji-won suggested that Eden and the others who were off duty today should go celebrate Maru-han's birthday and have dinner with him. Hearing this, Go Duckman immediately became interested and said they should take the day off and go eat together. Kang Chana said they were still on emergency standby, so there was no need for alcohol. The moment Go Duckman heard that, he grabbed his clothes and left. They were all guys, so what was there to celebrate? He had never even celebrated his own birthday. Eden watched everyone discussing it and complained inwardly. It was just Maru-han's birthday. Did they really need to make such a big deal out of it? That was what he thought, but his body was honest. He carried a cake and rushed home without stopping. But inside the house, there were only two muscular men working out, and Maru-han was nowhere to be seen. Wang Gi-jung told him that today was Maru-han's birthday, so they had specially given him the day off and let him go out to meet his friends. Since Eden was already here, there was no need for them to stay any longer. Eden waited inside the room until midnight, but Maru-han still did not come back. His phone was also turned off. This made Eden imagine something terrible. Could Maru-han have already been attacked by one of the 8? Just then, the sound of the door opening interrupted his thoughts. He rushed out at the speed of a 100-meter sprint. But the scene in front of him made him grit his teeth in anger. It seemed his worry had been completely unnecessary. Maru-han was dead drunk and had even dragged a man home with him. Eden asked who the man was and why he had brought a homeless guy home. Maru-han said he was a friend he had met on the road, so they had a drink together. Eden grabbed him by the collar and asked if he had lost his mind, bringing a stranger home during a special situation like this. He told Maru-han to take him out immediately. Maru-han outright ignored Eden's orders and brought the white-haired man into his own room. And, from Maru-han's perspective, Eden could not even remember the birthday of a coworker living under the same roof, which made him a heartless guy. Maru-han slept on the floor, while the white-haired man lay on the bed. In his sleep, a shadow of a hand covered Maru-han's face. Then, Maru-han suddenly felt like he could not breathe. When he woke up, he found that the white-haired man was choking him, while murmuring that it was time to return to Narak. When Maru-han heard the word Narak, he demanded to know who the man really was. Before the white-haired man's fatal blow could land, Maruhan blocked it with his arm in time. Then, he released a massive amount of yellow sand. At the same time, he activated the immortal Rakshasa's ability. Using the ability to manifest weapons from immortal tattoos, he formed a hammer and smashed it straight into the white-haired man's head. The violent noise made Eden think they were doing something indecent in the room. But when he opened the door, he saw yellow sand filling the entire room and the two of them fighting to the death. Maruhan pointed at the white-haired man and said that guy attacked him first, and even said he was going to take him back to Narak. Hearing this, Eden realized this guy was not human at all, and asked Maruhan what the hell he had brought home. Maruhan tried to use the tattoo weapon manifestation again, but the white-haired man charged straight at him. Eden immediately snapped his fingers and activated his ability, interrupting the white-haired man's attack. The white-haired man stared coldly at Eden and told him not to get in his way. Maruhan used the immortal tattoo ability to manifest a handgun and pressed it against the white-haired man's forehead. He demanded to know who the man really was. He clearly had no Rakshasa aura, so why was he attacking him? But the white-haired man suddenly laughed like a madman, because he was one of the 8. With that, he pierced his own throat, and a large amount of red smoke poured out of his mouth. Then, while the red smoke blocked their vision, he charged at Maruhan again. Seeing this, Eden broke his arm and activated his ability. But this time, he failed to stop the white-haired man's attack, and Maruhan was stabbed straight through the chest. His ability seemed to have failed. Maruhan took advantage of the close distance and bit into his neck. Normally, after using Gluttony's ability, this member of the 8 should have been finished. But Maruhan felt no sensation of absorbing an ability at all. And the problem was the red smoke. That smoke prevented them from using their abilities. The white-haired man in front of them was one of the 8, the Nullification Rakshasa. Once their abilities were sealed, they completely lost the core of their combat strategy and teamwork. Before long, Maruhan was pinned beneath the Nullification Rakshasa. Eden lifted a hammer and attacked from behind. But the Nullification Rakshasa instantly noticed him. It struck back with a punch, sending Eden crashing into the wall and leaving him unable to fight. Maruhan realized that if they kept fighting here, not only Eden, but even the nearby residents would be in danger. So he had to lure the enemy somewhere with no people around. He smashed through the window and leaped down from the high-rise. His body slammed hard into the ground. Maruhan could clearly feel that his body was recovering much slower than before, and this condition had continued ever since his battle with the immortal Rakshasa. The Nullification Rakshasa caught up and told him to stop struggling, asking him not to make things so troublesome. It had originally planned to quietly take Maruhan away while he was asleep, but now it had no choice but to use some special methods. The Nullification Rakshasa smiled and told Maruhan to stop resisting and return to Narak's embrace. It wore the gentlest smile on the surface, but the weapon in its hand showed no mercy at all. It raised a steel shard and swung it straight toward Maruhan's neck. Wang Jijung, who had already heard the commotion, arrived just in time to support him, and his younger brother Jung-in was right behind him. These two brothers really were model workers among the special appointees. They never slacked off when it came to a mission, although the higher-ups had officially canceled the protection mission for Maruhan. In secret, they had still left plenty of personnel on standby. In the blink of an eye, all the support had already arrived. After releasing the red smoke, the Nullification Rakshasa smiled, feeling that things were finally getting interesting. To protect the surrounding buildings and residents, the ability users activated their powers and prepared to build a defensive wall. The Wang brothers, Jijung and Jung-in, also clasped hands, preparing to activate their ability and join the fight. But after only half a second, everyone froze. They could no longer sense their abilities, as if their powers had been completely sealed. Maruhan explained that the red smoke nullified abilities and told them to run. In front of that thing, they were all just ordinary people. But before he could even finish, Wang Dijun was already sent flying backward. His younger brother Jung-in was no exception and was kicked straight into a building. Once all abilities were sealed, the battle turned into the most primitive close-range brawl, or rather, a street fight. But how could humans who were used to relying on abilities possibly be a match for one of the 8? The Nullification Rakshasa quickly knocked half of them to the ground. Feeling a little bored, it decided to try a more unusual weapon. It directly pulled out the tall utility pole in front of it and smashed it down toward the remaining people. Fortunately, Maruhan acted in time and knocked it aside, preventing anyone from getting hurt. "If you came here to capture me, then attack me, you damn Rakshasa." The Nullification Rakshasa did not refuse and immediately lunged at him. Maruhan turned and ran, planning to lure it somewhere with no people around. After all, the only way to stop it was to rely on his own power as one of the 8. If the others stayed here, they would only add to the casualties. But he also could not understand why his strength had visibly weakened. At this rate, there was no way he could beat it. Before long, Maruhan ran into a school. Since it was midnight, there basically should not be anyone inside, so he would not have to worry about casualties if they fought here. Maruhan randomly picked a classroom and sat down, planning to rest for a moment and think about how to beat the enemy without being able to use gluttony. But what he did not know was that the nullification Rakshasa had already locked onto him. It punched straight through the wall, and Maruhan was instantly slammed half to death along with it. This was the absolute combat power of the 8. The nullification Rakshasa patted Maruhan on the head and told him to wake up, asking how he could pass out so quickly. Maruhan suddenly opened his eyes and punched straight toward the nullification Rakshasa's face. But the nullification Rakshasa seemed to have expected it and blocked the attack with ease. Then it forcefully pinned down Maruhan's chest and ripped off his entire arm. Holding Maruhan's severed arm, it mocked him with disappointment, saying that even if he could not use his Rakshasa abilities because of the red smoke, he was still far too weak for one of the 8. Or had he lost his control over gluttony? Control. This was the first time Maruhan had ever heard that term. In an instant, Maruhan arrived inside his consciousness space. He raised the arm, wrapped in threads. This time, he finally saw the other end of those threads clearly. There was no gluttony Rakshasa there. The nullification Rakshasa comforted him, saying there was no need to be sad, even if he had lost control. Once they returned to that world, gluttony would belong to Naraka again anyway. With that, it waved its hand and summoned a pillar gate, then smiled and said, "All right, let's go home." At that moment, Maruhan began violently releasing yellow sand from his mouth. In the end, he actually forced himself to use the immortal Rakshasa's ability through the red smoke, using the immortal tattoos to transform his entire body into a C4 bomb. Right before the Rakshasa gate fully opened, he pressed the detonation switch. The next second, his entire body detonated in an instant. The flames lit up the entire school. Although the nullification Rakshasa dodged in time, it still took serious damage. As it recovered from its injuries, it wondered in frustration where Maruhan had escaped to this time. Meanwhile, inside a refrigerated truck, beneath the Manhwa Island office building, a severed finger was hanging in the center, surrounded by pieces of flesh and blood. As a large amount of yellow sand poured out from the finger, the surrounding flesh and blood began melting rapidly, turning into nutrients that rushed toward the severed finger, while the outline of a new body gradually took shape. It turned out that after the immortal Rakshasa incident was resolved, some genius in the group had come up with an idea to deal with the possibility of the other members of the 8 coming to steal Maruhan. Go Duckman had suggested cutting off several of Maruhan's fingers as backups. To keep them fresh, they had even specially stored them inside a refrigerated truck. Before long, Maruhan came running out of the truck, completely naked.